Hey guys, welcome to part 5 of What If Sage Naruto Joined Akatsuki. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 18. Deidara flew along, filling the void of sky and the void of conversation by running through hypothetical scenarios that she might find her perpetually dying partner in. Maybe he's been kidnapped by pirates that sealed his chakra or something. That's probably why he's not heading back to shore right now, yeah. Or he was dropped off on some island paradise and is enjoying a nice relaxing vacation right about now. I bet it's that. I'm going to teach him to let me think he's in danger, yeah. Deidara passed the time it was taking her seagull to traverse the open ocean by creating small works of art, each no bigger than a marble, and tossing them into the air for a small fireworks display. It always helped her relax, seeing something only she could do. Sure, there were other members of the explosive corps back in the Hidden Rock village who could use the explosion style like her, but they were a dying breed. Besides, other than Orochimaru, she was the only living person with the ability to infuse her chakra into different materials. After a lot of trial and error, she had decided on clay, for the taste, ease of procurement, and the fact that it was easy to sculpt. Usually the forbidden technique was used to control things remotely, like she did with her birds, but only someone with the explosion-style bloodline was able to make them explode like she did. It was a little lonely, being the only person capable of creating true art, but true art was born of suffering. And suffer she had. Ever since she was a child, no one had ever understood Deidara's art. Nobody said it to her face, she was too skilled of a ninja for anyone to just insult like that. Her skills with clay sculptures had earned her some semblance of respect from museums and the like, but fellow ninja respected the young Jonin for her skill with the explosion release. Then the third Kage had chosen to train her as his successor, and she garnered even more respect from her fellow ninjas. But the artist shied away from her beautiful explosions, calling them dangerous and ugly. Ugly. Likewise, her sculpting was frowned upon by even her mentor. The Kage had dismissed her clay creations as useless and distracting to such a prodigious ninja. So she had tried to make her art useful to the Hidden Rock village by merging her two arts. Some research had uncovered an old forbidden jutsu that allowed a ninja to infuse objects with their chakra. So she took it, looking to make her peers and mentor proud. Instead, the Hidden Rock as a whole, even the Kage himself, was displeased and disgusted. The destruction of her beautiful clay sculptures was an affront to all art, and her clay sculptures made her explosion style a terrible mutation of the time-honored traditions of her clan's techniques. But Deidara saw the beauty of her new art. It joined the two art forms wholly and completely, creating an art that transcended her past attempts. With this, Deidara could create true art. So Deidara took it upon herself to show the village what true art was. In her first real art showing, buildings were destroyed, beautiful flames flashed across the sky, and Deidara was declared a missing ninja. Not that she cared, any village that couldn't appreciate her art wasn't worthy of her anyway. So she left, taking jobs where she could find them, and traveling the world to look for inspiration. It was on one of those jobs that she had met Naruto. The young blonde, know that she had been any older, was overconfident, unappreciative, and all around infuriating. So it figured that he would be her partner for the next few years. It was only supposed to be for one quick job: go in, show art, leave craters where uninspired bigots had once stood. But then Akatsuki had intervened. Pain had leveled the rebel base by himself, something even she was impressed by. She had thought S-rank ninjas might be more appreciative of her art, and with the exception of that stupid puppeteer, they did tolerate the exploding sculptures. But the only one who agreed with Deidara on the subject of true art was her partner. Deidara sighed as she flicked one more chunk of clay off the edge of her bird. If the sage didn't appreciate her art, she would have ditched him years ago. The bit of clay exploded in a bright ball of flames, and Deidara sighed again. It just wasn't art without an audience. So she set off to find her partner who had been lost at sea so her art could have an admiring audience again. You know, we aren't in enemy territory yet, said Jiraiya, trying in vain to get a response from either of his masked companions. This was exactly why he didn't like Anbu, rude or otherwise. Honestly, it's like someone died here. Surprisingly enough, this elicited a response from the rude Anbu to his right. Keep talking, and someone will. Jiraiya sighed at the overly militaristic answer. He was one of Danzo's all right. Oddly, the regular forces Anbu remained silent, not talking even when Danzo's follower did. Jiraiya didn't like turning to Danzo for help, but it was likely the only way to get ninja of a high enough quality who, as much as it pained him to think this way, wouldn't be missed. The Sannin jumped through the canopy of his homeland's forests to land near the border to the land of rain. The sight of the war-torn country brought back a flood of memories of the last Ninja World War and the orphans he had saved. The land of rain had the misfortune of bordering three of the great nations and having a rather lackluster ninja force itself. The result was a country that was fought for to the detriment of the population. As if to add to the depression of the countryside, the land of rain had earned its name with a near-constant precipitation. Pretty depressing, huh? Probed Jiraiya, hoping to nudge his comrades into conversation. What's depressing are the border patrols and the hidden rain's strict anti-visitor policy. Are you sure that the Akatsuki is based out of the hidden rain? This time it was Tsunade's Anbu who voiced his concerns, which made sense, since Danzo would never let his rude Anbu question a superior officer. Of course I am. I got his location from a very reliable source, but I didn't think it reliable enough to investigate until I got his identity from one of Akatsuki's own members. I've heard of him trying to liberate the hidden rain from Hanzo before, though I heard he died in the attempt. Jiraiya turned to his partners with a wide grin on his face. As for how we get there, you are about to see how the great Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin uses his amazing prowess as the Toad Sage to infiltrate even the most guarded castles to be with the many princesses who find his charm and fantastic looks irresistible. His illustrious boasting got no response from the two ninja, one trained to suppress his emotions and the other trained to have none. Jiraiya dropped his pose and sighed at his Anbus's lack of respect for such a legendary ninja revealing his hidden techniques. He ran through some seals as he looked at the two Anbu members, trying to see the awe they no doubt were hiding with their masks. In a puff of smoke, a tiny toad appeared. Behold! Shouted Jiraiya in a voice that did not lend itself to stealth in the least. The illustrious Jiraiya's hiding in a toad technique. I bet you're wondering what it is, huh? I'm guessing we hide this toad, though I'm not sure how or why, replied the blank mask of the rude Anbu member. Of course you can't. That's the beauty of it. No one would suspect this tiny little frog of being able to contain the greatness that is Jiraiya of the Sannin. Even the toad was rolling its eyes at this point. Come on. Defying every law of physics in existence, Jiraiya was quickly swallowed by the toad that couldn't be larger than his foot. The small amphibian opened its mouth as if inviting the two Anbu members to jump in. The two turned to each other and attempted to squeeze into the toad's mouth. It was surprisingly easy, as they seemed to shrink as they pushed further in until the toad's mouth was more akin to a large cave than an inch of toad mouth. Jiraiya sat on the toad's tongue, and shouted out as if the frog could hear him. All right. Let's go to the village hidden in the rain. Apparently the toad could hear him, as the entire cavity the three ninja occupied shook violently as the toad hopped towards their destination. Jiraiya was the only one who didn't stumble as the toad's mouth shook. The two quickly found out that applying chakra to their feet in a matter similar to water walking prevented them from stumbling around like a pair of drunks. For the brief moments that they were completely taken off guard, Jiraiya seemed to find their plight extremely amusing. Okay, now if you don't want me to chuck you out of this toad's mouth right now, you'll tell me why you can take on even one member of Akatsuki. I don't need some wannabes tagging along on a mission this dangerous. The member of Danzo's root Anbu was used to giving replies to even the most personal questions without hesitation, and he answered first. My partner died years ago. It was later discovered he was killed by Akatsuki. I have been trained to counter the members of the organization that we know about. Tsunade's Anbu was not about to be undone by his darker counterpart. I am an accomplished Anbu member who was trained from a young age due to special circumstances. Jiraiya's suspicious look was enough to drag the rest of the information out of the reluctant Anbu member. Due to Orochimaru's experimentation, I am the sole living user of the wood style. I was chosen specifically to subdue any tailed beasts we may or may not encounter in addition to combating Akatsuki. Their explanations seemed to satisfy the Sannin for the time being. Good, you wouldn't stand a chance against Akatsuki's leader, but that's why you have the fabulous Jiraiya. You just keep any other members off my back and rescue any jinchuriki that aren't dead. The latter is unlikely though, so don't worry too much about it. And remember, the information we gather on Akatsuki doesn't do anyone any good if we die in there, so don't do anything I wouldn't do. With Jiraiya's resounding laugh echoing inside its mouth, the diving toad hopped through the rain towards Akatsuki's lair. So how far is the village hidden in the clouds again? Asked Fu as she flew backwards alongside Sasuke's hawk. Ever since his catastrophic attempts to use his new eyes, the last Uchiha had been incredible irritable, which provided Fu with some measure of entertainment as they headed towards a new village that would supposedly keep her safe from Akatsuki. Clearly further than we have traveled, responded the Uchiha crossly. He did not appreciate Fu's happy-go-lucky attitude in the face of such peril, though it was likely only compounding on his summon's lack of cooperation and his non-functional eye. Every time he had tried to use it, it had bleed and caused a massive amount of pain, though it had been bleeding less and less each time. Eventually, Sasuke had simply given up on the idea of using the eye outside of a pressing battle situation. Do you even know where the village is? Asked Fu, grinning smugly at the Uchiha's one alert eye. It is pretty hidden. Sasuke simply growled in response, prompting Fu to giggle and flit away. If all the jinchuriki were this annoying, Sasuke was beginning to see how Akatsuki could justify hunting them. Moments later, his right eye spun into the Sharingan as he dove off his hawk to knock Fu out of the way of an incoming fire-style jutsu. Fu's wings managed to slow their descent to a gentle landing as Sasuke looked around for their attackers, wary of Akatsuki. Not cool, idiot, droned a bored-sounding voice. What if they had been diplomats? You might have started another war with that boneheaded move. The speaker revealed herself as a blonde cloud ninja, and the attacker followed her dejectedly. Her short-cut hair was a lighter shade than the man standing next to her, though the style was the same. In contrast to the man's traditional one-shoulder flak jacket, she wore a low-cut outfit that displayed her sizable cleavage, with some kind of modified flak jacket around only her stomach. Of course, Sasuke noticed this only after their weapons, a short tanto and katana, and their lack of Akatsuki attire. Realizing that they weren't a threat, Sasuke let out a relieved sigh. You're mocking me and my sister, pal, shouted the man with a tattoo of the kanji for heat on his left shoulder. Well, I bet you're not so hot, Leaf Ninja. Before the woman who apparently his sister could react, the hot-headed ninja sprinted to Sasuke, katana drawn. Of course, with the Sharingan, Sasuke easily dodged the straight-forwards attack, and knocked the sword out of the idiot's hands. A sharp kick delivered to the fool's gut sent him flying back to his sister as Sasuke caught the katana. I'm here to speak with the Raikage, not fight, said Sasuke in a voice that accepted no argument. The female ninja seemed all too eager to avoid an unnecessary conflict, but her brother apparently didn't agree. Alright, you're pretty good hotshot, he said, picking himself up and running through some hand seals. But can you stop this hot attack? Fire style. Fireball. The self-proclaimed hotshot spat of a ball of fire, and Sasuke quickly ran through his own seals. Despite not wanting to fight, his Uchiha pride refused to let him lose in a battle of fire-style techniques, even if he did primarily use lightning style. Fire style. Grand Fireball. It was a basic jutsu taught to children of the Uchiha clan, but it was enough to completely overwhelm its less grand counterpart. The blonde cloud ninja jumped above the flames, screaming his challenge and effectively ruining any chance he had at a surprise attack. Sasuke nailed him in the gut with his own katana, using the dull side to prevent messing up any chance he still had at talking to the Raikage. The female didn't see him use the non-lethal edge of the sword, and her brother's exaggerated performance wasn't helping. She drew Tanto and ran at Sasuke, who readied the katana to defend himself. At the last moment, she channeled lightning chakra down her short sword, and if it hadn't been for his Sharingan, Sasuke would have missed it. As it was, he channeled lightning chakra down his own sword, and the two enhanced blades clashed equally. Except that the katana had the advantage of weight, allowing it to knock the Tanto from his opponent's grasp. Deciding to halt any further conflict, Sasuke grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back and placed the stolen katana against her neck. Taking her hostage had an immediate effect on her brother, who stopped dead in his tracks, suddenly less keen on continuing the battle. Samui. The male ninja grit his teeth in anger and glared at Sasuke, not willing to risk his sister's life in another foolish attack. You bastard, taking a hostage just because you can't handle my blazing hot spirit is just plain cold. Shut up, Atsui, said Samui, surprisingly calm for having a sword against her throat. He could have ended this a dozen times over by now, but we're both still alive. That means he wants us alive for some reason. Sasuke sighed exasperatedly. I want you alive, because killing you would defeat my purpose in coming here. I'm looking for refuge from Akatsuki. The name elicited a sharp intake of breath from Samui, and she muttered something about a bee. Guillotine drop. Sasuke tossed Samui out of the way and brought up the katana to block the kick form above that came out of nowhere. Instead of cutting off the offending limb, the stolen blade snapped in half like a brittle twig, but it slowed the attack long enough for Sasuke to get out of the way. Jumping away from his new attacker, he looked over his shoulder at Fu, who was lounging on her stomach atop his hawk, which was apparently just as interested in helping him as the green-haired jinchuriki. Watch out, replied Fu, enjoying watching Sasuke on the ropes far more than she should. Sasuke glowered at her before turning back to the new threat, only to be shocked at the new arrival. He was incredibly tall, built entirely of rippling muscle and opting to show it off by going shirtless underneath a wide open cloak. What was most impressive though, was the lightning chakra that he was completely covered in. The Sharingan dissected the technique, though Sasuke could only equate it with chakra channeling, only using one's own body instead of a sword or kunai. The sheer amount of chakra required to use it on such a scale was terrifying though. As he marveled at the muscle-bound ninja with chakra to burn, two more cloud ninja arrived. One was blonde, while the other had short white hair and seemed more laid back and bored than Fu. The blonde turned to his darker-skinned companion. Should we stop Lord Raikage? You can if you want to. I'm content to let him have his fun. Sasuke's eye widened as he overheard their conversation. Apparently the man who had just attacked him was none other than the Raikage himself. Deciding that he didn't want to fight another S-rank ninja so soon, Sasuke decided to try and stem the fighting before it could get any further out of hand. Hold Raikage. I don't want to fight, just ask for your help. The dark-skinned Raikage was having none of it though, and his lightning armor became even larger if such a thing were possible. You attack my ninja, and then you have the audacity to ask for my help. You aren't even from an allied village, Leaf Ninja. Fu apparently decided that Sasuke was going to get killed at this rate, and choose to add her 2 cents. It's about the jinchuriki. Her shout couldn't have sounded more apathetic and insincere, but the Raikage looked intrigued anyway. Oh. Well, if it's about that, I suppose I'll give you a chance. Sasuke opened his mouth to thank the Raikage, but the man's shout cut him off. My jinchuriki are hunted by powerful ninja. If you want to prove yourself worthy of even talking about them to me, you'll need to prove yourself. If you wound me, even a scratch, I'll hear you out. If you can't, I'll kill you for wasting my time. Sasuke's soul Sharingan widened as the Raikage ran towards him, his lightning armor distorting the Sharingan's view. As disorienting as it was, without the bloodline of the Uchiha clan, Sasuke wouldn't have been able to see the Raikage as the man moved with a speed that belied his size. The man swung an arm as if to clothesline Sasuke, who barely ducked under even a blow as telegraphed and straightforward as that. The Raikage spun around though, and grabbed Sasuke firmly with both hands around the waist before hoisting him into the air. Liger Bomb. The Raikage spun Sasuke upside down and smashed him into the ground as Sasuke frantically ripped the bandages off of his left eye. He barely made it in time, and stopped his head from becoming a bloodstain on the ground by creating the beginnings of Susanoo armor around himself to absorb the blow. As it was, he was barely able to get a ribcage pee before the strain became too much for his newly upgraded eyes and the skeletal construct faded. Perhaps conducting organ transplant on himself in the field wasn't the brightest idea. Pushing himself to get moving after only a few minutes rest after ditching Itachi's corpse and stealing his other eye also might have been a bad idea. The Raikage leapt back as blood ran down Sasuke's face. The Uchiha reached up and pulled his leaf headband down over his left eye, similar to his teacher. The Raikage landed over by his subordinates, who seemed awed by the fight. So it seems the Uchiha clan isn't completely dead. You even have some nifty tricks. Sasuke thought angrily that if he really wanted to, he could probably burn the Raikage alive with Amaterasu, though he passed over the option in favor of not killing his one chance to stop Akatsuki. Instead, Sasuke opted to go for his staple technique when presented with a difficult-to-pierce armor. The armor he usually pierced wasn't made of lightning though, but his Chidori only had to make a scratch. The Raikage glared at Sasuke's left hand as it began to glow bright blue and shriek with the signature chirping of the Chidori. Sasuke dashed forward, using his lightning-filled fist to cover his blind left side. Chidori. The Raikage, never one to back down, answered the attack with his own rush attack. Sasuke's one Mangekyo Sharingan was enough to let him see the attack in slow motion, though he noticed that the edges of the Raikage's arm were sort of fuzzy. Promising himself to use Itachi's right eye to restore his sight if he lived through this, Sasuke ducked under the Raikage's blow and thrust out with his Chidori. He grunted in exertion as he pushed harder, making a shallow cut that could have been made by a piece of paper on the Raikage's chest. Before realizing that he had been cut, losing the bet he had made, the Raikage had already grabbed Sasuke's face in the palm of his massive hand and lifted him bodily into the air. Looking down at the drop of blood that trickled lazily down his chest and grimacing, he dropped Sasuke to the ground, none too gently. All right boy, talk. The water reflects the darkness inside. Just sit down and close your eyes. If against your inner darkness you prevail, I'll tell you the next step of mastering the nine tails. Rapped Killer Bee as Naruto walked out to the small island at the base of the waterfall. He was both curious and skeptical of mastering the nine tails, but it would have to wait until he beat his dark side. No stranger to meditation, Naruto felt right at home sitting still and closing his eyes. The area was so permeated with natural chakra, he had to actively stop himself from gathering it and keep his abilities hidden. It wasn't that he didn't trust Killer Bee, he just didn't really trust anyone. You do trust some people though, right? Naruto's eyes opened immediately as he heard a voice that sounded exactly like his own but softer. His eyes widened as he saw someone who could have passed for his twin, the only difference was the difference in their attire. While his doppelganger was wearing the cloak that had been a gift from Fukusaku and Shima when he left Mount Myobokuzen, Naruto himself was somehow wearing his Akatsuki cloak again. Because you really should let people in every now and then. Who knows, they might surprise you. Naruto scowled at his inner darkness, skeptically. The copy in front of him didn't really seem any darker than he did. In fact, the double seemed nicer than the devious Akatsuki member. As if sensing his thought, the opposite Naruto spoke up. You'll have to forgive Killer Bee. The waterfall of truth doesn't so much as show you your inner darkness, so much as the side of you that you keep back. How did you know what I was thinking? Asked Naruto frantically. Try as he might, Naruto was sensing nothing from his clone. If it came to a fight, he would be at a disadvantage to an opponent who could read his thoughts. Because I'm you, just not the you that the world sees. Naruto tilted his head in curiosity and confusion. Which is nice for me, but I don't feel like you're putting your best foot forward with everyone else. Killer Bee said I had to defeat my inner darkness, but you don't seem all that dark. Naruto stopped for a moment as the realization hit him like a sledgehammer. So, does that mean, I'm the Dark One? Don't think of it like that. It was clear to Naruto that his copy was just trying to console him. You're not evil or anything, you just don't trust people. It isn't like you're full of hate, just deceit. Deal with that, and you're a stand-up member of society. It's that easy to fix. Trusting people is dangerous. You think Killer Bee would give me a pat on the back if he found out I was a member of Akatsuki? And no one in Akatsuki would even hesitate to seal me if they found out I'm a jinchuriki, countered Naruto with the logic that had justified his actions as a member of Akatsuki. I bet Deidara would hesitate, said his doppelganger with a frustrating smile on his face. Naruto just scowled in response, but he couldn't honestly deny the hope that his longtime partner and friend would at least pause if she found out his secret. See, said opposite Naruto, sensing the hope inside the more skeptical Akatsuki member. It isn't that hard to just believe in people every now and then. I'd like to think she wouldn't take me out, but it's a fool's dream. You're just an imposter wearing my face. If you were the real me, I wouldn't be living a lie. I'd be dead, sighed Naruto tiredly. Maybe, conceded opposite Naruto. You probably are the one who keeps us alive. But if that's true, then I'm the one who keeps us sane. He paused to look at Naruto with eyes that were a terrifying black and red that contrasted sharply with his happy and trusting attitude. Everybody needs at least one friend. Ha! Scoffed Naruto. What friend? Killer Bee. We both know I'm using him until I get back to Akatsuki. Akatsuki. We all know that we're tools to each other's ends. I don't think even Pain is ideological enough to believe we all want world peace. I helped you get Deidara as a friend. All friendship needs some level of trust, argued opposite Naruto. And I'm you, so don't even try to deny she isn't your friend, he added playfully. Fine, she's my friend. For now, he added with a glare at his cheery doppelganger. The moment she figures out I've been lying to her all these years, I'll be lucky if she even bothers to take me alive. Only one way to find out, responded opposite Naruto, sitting cross-legged on the water where he had emerged from the waterfall like someone who had all the time in the world. I'll be waiting right here for her response. Naruto paled at what his trusting self was implying. Before he could respond, his actual body was unceremoniously dumped in the water. Naruto came up sputtering and glared at Killer Bee as best as he could. The rapper just shook off the look as the island rumbled again. Was that some kind of earthquake? Nah, this island isn't just some rocky circle. The reason it's safe is cause it's really a turtle. Naruto didn't really have the heart to tell Killer Bee that his rhymes were terrible. He doubted Killer Bee would care either. I can ignore Akatsuki and focus on my singing, because this giant turtle is always swimming. Then what was that just now? As if to punctuate his question, the island turtle gave another shudder. Hell if I know, I ain't wise. But I'm smart enough to notice your freaky eyes. Naruto looked down at the pool, and he noticed that he had unconsciously been absorbing natural chakra while he was meditating despite the ripples in the water. Sure enough, his eyes were the familiar golden of sage mode. This is the technique that lets me fight on par with Akatsuki without my tailed beast. Naruto looked around to confirm his suspicions. This area is almost as saturated as the oil springs back home. I'd be hard-pressed not to be in sage mode here. There was another tremble across the island, but the two jinchuriki were prepared and didn't as much as stumble. So what were those tremors? If this turtle doesn't have earthquakes, what were those? Naruto's question was answered in a second as he readjusted to sage mode's sensory range and noticed a familiar chakra. Deidara found me. How though? Naruto was talking quietly to himself, but Killer Bee had overheard. Who's that? An old friend? Or an enemy with whom we'll need to contend? Yeah. Naruto flinched as Killer Bee celebrated his amazing rhyme skills. Sorry about your friends, yeah. Naruto had known she had been there, but Killer Bee whirled around at the sound of Deidara's voice. I asked for Naruto, and they started to disagree. One thing led to another and well, I hope you weren't too close to any of them. Now do I have to add one more to the body count, or can I have my partner back? Noticing her Akatsuki cloak, Killer Bee bounced to his imaginary beat. Don't know what you mean by partner, but for Naruto I won't barter, or my name isn't Killer Bee, bro to the Raikage and jinchuriki. Deidara's eyes widened at Killer Bee's reckless declaration. She hadn't really been expecting to actually find the jinchuriki of the Eight Tails when Kakuzu had asked for her help, and here he was. Practically announcing his status as well. Deidara, how did you find me? Asked Naruto. He was honestly glad to see his partner, but he was also terrified of her discovering the truth. Coupled with his regret over what he was about to do, and he was a raging maelstrom of emotion. You shut up. Yeah, responded Deidara irritably. I swear, you just love trying to give me a heart attack. Didn't even have the decency to keep your wounded ass nearby this time. Naruto had the decency to look a tad embarrassed about his recent losing streak. I brought you a replacement cloak too. God knows how much Kakuzu pays for these things, so you're footing the bill. Naruto caught the bundle of cloth that Deidara tossed to him easily. Yo Naruto, what this bitch talking about? Are you hearing the lies she spout? Saying you're a member of Akatsuki, when you're just like me, a jinchuriki. Rapped Killer B as he turned to Naruto. Sorry, B, responded Naruto as he donned the new Akatsuki cloak. But you know what they say. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. He pulled his fist back and launched Killer B into the woods, toppling a few trees. Naruto hopped up onto Deidara's bird. Sorry about making you track me down. But at least you didn't have to put up with his rapping. If I didn't know it would break my hand, I'd slap you right now, responded Deidara angrily. Naruto winced at the empty threat. How about I take this jinchuriki alone to show you how sorry I am? You get to just sit back and relax. Catching Deidara's look, Naruto quickly amended his offer. And I promise the only near death will be his. TCH. Fine. I'll go get a good view, yeah. Deidara unceremoniously shoved Naruto off of her bird as she rose up to a safer distance. Being an S-rank ninja, Naruto easily landed on his feet, and he waited for Killer B to get up. Sure enough, one surprise attack hadn't been enough to take the jinchuriki of the Eight Tails out. I gotta say, your betrayal bites deep. But you got a secret that ya gotta keep. Still, I ain't just gonna go to sleep. If I got caught, my bro might weep. Naruto smiled a bit sadly. I really am sorry about all this. But I'm going to be coming at you full force. Just think of it as an intense sparring match. Killer B smirked as he flicked the 7 swords strapped to his back into the air. They came down, and Killer B caught all of them in an impressive display of skill. The truly strange part was the fact that not a single blade had landed in his hands. Killer B was the first to move. The lunge to Naruto a bit by surprise, but he managed to react in time to Killer B's ferocious attack. A swordsman would usually have an opening after such a reckless attack, but Killer B's many blades turned him into a sort of living buzzsaw. The large rapper kept spinning, intent on cutting the Akatsuki member, for he refused to think of Naruto as anything else lest he hesitate, into pieces. He wasn't expecting Naruto to catch one of the swords though, trying to use it as leverage to knock him off balance. Still, the blade was only held by his knee, and Killer B easily let it go. He twisted while upside down and flung some of his remaining swords at Naruto point blank. The jinchuriki of the Eight Tails landed on his feet with one sword in each hand and one in his mouth, expecting to see the other 3 embedded in his opponent. Instead, he saw Naruto drop the sword he had caught into the dirt with the other 3. They had certainly hit their mark. There was no way they could have missed at such close range, but Naruto didn't have so much as a scratch. It wouldn't be too impressive for a jinchuriki since their tailed beast usually increased the rate of healing, but Killer B's swords were also clean, implying that they had never penetrated. You'll need to better than that B, taunted Naruto good-naturedly. I wasn't let into Akatsuki because I relied on a tailed beast. This is all me. Killer B grinned at the challenge. Most defensive techniques of that caliber were Earth style, and B had the perfect counter. Naruto raised an eyebrow as lightning coursed down Killer B's swords, increasing their cutting potential 100-fold. My super vibrato blades cut through all. Your defenses can no longer stall. Rapped Killer B as he charged again. This time though, he threw the blade in his mouth and rapped as he sprinted in form the side. Naruto did the unexpected though, running towards the blade that was flying through the air. He ducked to the side and grabbed the sword out of the air, swinging it around to parry Killer B's other blade. The third sword was still swinging down on Naruto, who was at a range that didn't allow dodging. So Naruto didn't dodge. He could have easily defended against the blow and come away with little more than a small cut, but wanted to get through this fight without as much as a scratch to prove to Deidara he wasn't losing his touch. So he attacked, punching out with his free hand under the sword to send Killer B flying once more. Sorry B, but you'll need to do better than that straightforward attack. Naruto was just mocking Killer B, the attack had actually been pretty good, not that B would know that. So step it up if you don't want to be smacked. That's pretty good, but I'm still the best. At rhymes and fighting, I've been blessed. Rapped Killer Bee. Naruto was both mortified that Killer Bee's rhymes were apparently contagious and confused as to whether it was a blessing or a curse. You joined Akatsuki to not acquiesce. Let's put your survival to the test. Yeah. Killer Bee held his right hand to the heavens with his index and little fingers pointed upwards like two horns. Red chakra began to bubble up form under his skin, covering him entirely with 8 tails behind him. I don't need a tailed beast's help to survive. I've been doing it on my own for years. Said Naruto quietly as Killer Bee ran at him. Deciding to try and exploit the loss of reason that usually accompanied tailed beast chakra, Naruto ran through seals in a blur. Sage Art. Whirlwind Fist. The wind-covered fist came short of Killer Bee by several feet, but the wind around it elongated into a horizontal tornado. It likely did little lasting damage to the jinchuriki, protected as he was by his tailed beast's chakra, but it did send him hurtling off of the island entirely. Killer Bee righted himself, landing on the ocean as if it were solid land. Naruto jumped down after him, Akatsuki cloak blowing in the breeze. Killer Bee sheathed the 2 swords he had left, having lost the third some time ago. As he did, the red chakra around him receded until he stood in front of a quizzical Naruto completely defenseless. Naruto's unspoken questions were answered a moment later. Great tentacles began to grow from under Killer Bee's flak jacket, until each one was several times as big as he was. The tentacles thrashed around, kicking up a massive amount of water, and when the spray settled down, Naruto was looking at the 8 tails in all its glory. It had the lower half of an octopus, but the head of a bull. It had 2 strangely human arms, which it raised up in the same symbol that Killer Bee had used when first calling on his tailed beast's chakra. One horn was cut shorter than the other, likely a wound from a previous battle. All in all, it was a fearsome creature. Woohoo! Now gaze upon my splendor, and you might learn something. And all of the potential terror drained away immediately as Killer Bee's voice rapped away from the huge creature's mouth. I was fighting and rapping when you were still a babe suckling. 8 parts black and 2 parts white, the tailed beast bomb wins any fight. Yeah. Naruto was confused a bit by the last part, mostly by how informative Killer Bee was about the attack's composition. Despite calling the chakra black and white, the small orbs of chakra that were slowly gathering in front of the 8 tails mouth were red and blue. When they gathered though, the resulting ball was a purplish black. And it was huge. There was no way Naruto would be able to dodge that, and he doubted his previous tactic of attacking would do anything to disrupt the tailed beast ball. That left him the unfavorable option of somehow blocking the attack. Naruto raised both thumbs to his mouth and used a Sage Mode enhanced bite to pierce his own skin. Naruto swiped the blood over his other fingers and began the seals for the one technique he had that might be able to stop his disintegration. Sage Art. Protection of the Fallen. It wasn't smiled upon to use the statues of those who had failed to master Sage Mode, but it wasn't forbidden either. Besides, they were large, virtually invincible, and available in abundance. Killer Bee finished charging his own attack, and fired it in the direction of the white smoke form Naruto's summoning. The young sage was confident that the statues would be enough to deflect a ball of chakra, no matter how powerful. And indeed they would have been, but Killer Bee was in control, not the 8 tails. With the added ingenuity of a high-leveled ninja, the attack no longer looked like a ball. Instead, Killer Bee detonated the sphere prematurely and only on one side. Its result was a massive laser fired from the tailed beast's mouth that was less powerful than a tailed beast ball, but impossible to deflect and more importantly, directed. The smoke cleared, and Naruto stepped out from behind his statue unscathed. The same could not be said of the fallen sages of yore. Of the 10 statues he had summoned, Naruto could only identify one as a large statue of a meditating toad, and all but 4 were completely gone. He paled at the destructive power of the technique, promising himself silently that he would commit Killer Bee's unintentional instructions for the technique to memory in case he could ever use his own tailed beast's chakra. Killer Bee was equally surprised that Naruto had survived his modified tailed beast ball. He was somewhat glad that he hadn't vaporized his fellow jinchuriki, but on the other hand his best attack had been stopped, which was never good for any ninja's pride. Honestly, that you survived made me surprised. But just give up, you can't fight on this size. Naruto smiled as he ran through the seals for the summoning once more. Maybe I can't, but I know someone who can. Summoning. Gamabunta. Slamming his hand on the water, Naruto was enveloped in a white cloud of smoke. The smoke cleared, and Naruto stood atop a toad every bit as large as the Eight Tails. The boss of the Toad Summons hadn't changed much over the years, still sporting a scar over his left eye from his clash with the Nine Tails all those years ago. Gamabunta took one look at the eight-tailed beast in front of him before addressing Naruto. I'm not going to bother asking why you summoned me, I'm not blind. But you'd better have a sampling of the best sake you've ever found when you come home. Naruto blanched, knowing that a sample for Gamabunta was enough to flood a small village. Still, he had little choice, and knew that once he downed a bit of sake, the old toad wouldn't really care what it tasted like. Sure thing, boss. Naruto had learned early on in life that nothing good came of not giving the toad boss the respect he deserved. Great, moaned Gamabunta to himself as he drew his sword. Minato has me fight the Nine Tails, Jiraiya has me fight the One Tail, and now you have me fighting the Eight Tails. I'm sensing a pattern. Naruto chuckled to himself at Gamabunta's complaining as the large toad jumped upwards as only a toad could. Naruto knew they were at sea though, so he'd have to keep this short before the salt in the water started to aggravate the toad's skin. Eight Tails shot up at Gamabunta as he flew over the Eight Tails' head. The toad slammed his hands together and spat out a massive ball of water to knock the tentacles away. Bringing his sword up, Gamabunta slashed down at the tailed beast. He managed to shear off the Eight Tails' remaining horn, restoring symmetry to the beast. Landing so close to the tailed beast though, Gamabunta was unable to dodge the tentacles that smacked him away. The Eight Tails reached a hand up to fell the flat surface where its horn had been. Naruto was unsure if such a wound would hurt Killer Bee and the tailed beast, but it didn't look like the Eight Tails was anything other than angry at them for cutting off his horn. It was moments like these that Naruto wished he had a large-scale or signature technique that didn't rely on the toads. As it happened though, he did have a toad, and that gave him access to techniques that outclassed anything he could do alone. Gamabunta, let's do this. Gamabunta would have nodded if the action wouldn't have sent Naruto flying downward into the ocean. As it was, he settled for slowly running through a series of hand seals and gathering a truly enormous amount of water-style chakra in the back of his throat. Naruto knelt down and placed his hands on Gamabunta's head, feeling for the exact moment to release his own stored-up chakra to aid in the technique. Without so much as a word, the two released their techniques simultaneously. Collaborative Sage Art. Massive Slicing Water Bullets. The amount of water that Gamabunta spewed at the Eight Tails dwarfed both creatures, and its potency was further increased by Naruto's Sage Chakra imbuing the technique with Wind-style chakra. Naruto was one of the only people capable of performing such a collaboration with Gamabunta, as matching the toad's massive chakra reserves was only possible with Sage mode. The wall of water was simply too large and fast for the Eight Tails to avoid. It might have been large, but the tailed beast was anything but agile. Unable to dodge, the mighty collaboration technique hit its target, and the massive Eight Tails was chopped into neat little cubes in a spurt of blood. Right before Naruto's eyes, the chunks of Eight Tails turned into a red chakra that flowed toward one chunk that was larger than the rest, which collapsed inwards to reveal Killer Bee, who gasped once before collapsing in exhaustion. Thanks for your help, Gamabunta, said Naruto gratefully. Tell Gamakichi I said hi. Not a moment too soon, grumbled the boss of the toads. This salt water was starting to dry out my skin. He disappeared in a cloud of smoke, and Naruto dropped to the surface of the ocean. He walked over to collect Killer Bee's body before it could sink to the bottom of the sea, grinning to himself at the Eight Tails Jinchuriki's resourcefulness. Looks like I'll have to forgive you after that, yeah, said Deidara, descending from her vantage point. I suppose we all get unlucky now and again. Just don't go losing left and right again, okay? Naruto would usually assure her that he had no intentions of losing anymore and laugh it off, but this time he had something on his mind. Deidara had traveled with him for years and noticed that Naruto wasn't his usual self. Alright, what's up? Don't feel bad about this guy, he totally insane, said Deidara, gesturing to Killer Bee. I mean, he spoke like bad poetry and actually thought you were a Jinchuriki, yeah. What did you have to do to get him to believe that anyway? Naruto was glad that Deidara hadn't figured it out. Form Killer Bee's rapping, deciding that the jinchuriki of the eight tails was just crazy. He was still debating telling her, but her hearing about it from anyone else would destroy their relationship entirely. Quick thinking and a few well-placed lies about Akatsuki hunting me down. Sorry if that made your arrival any more difficult, apologized Naruto. Nah, I just got to show off some new pieces, responded Deidara happily. Nothing could take her mind off of something like the memory of a masterpiece. Even a regular work of her art was distracting. Naruto grinned at his partner's antics, realizing just then how much he had missed her. He tossed her killer bee, and Deidara struggled to catch the heavy jinchuriki. You go on ahead. I got some decent info from Killer Bee, and I want to check it out before I lose the island entirely. He pointed over Deidara's shoulder, and sure enough, the giant turtle was slowly swimming away. I'll join you for the ceiling, and then meet up with you later. Deal. Deidara looked at her partner's outstretched hand, then at the receding island. Information was power, and it was clear to her that this information was what was bothering Naruto. She sighed heavily, then handed him a small sculpture of an owl. Fine. This will get you off of the island, so you don't have to swim all the way back to solid land, yeah. The mainland is that way, she said, pointing in the direction she had arrived from. Try not to get yourself killed. I won't, and I'll let you in on a little secret after I'm done, teased Naruto. Deidara scoffed amusedly at his remarks, but flew off to the nearest Akatsuki base to seal the eight tails. Naruto turned around, and headed back towards the giant turtle island to see what Killer Bee had meant by mastering the nine tails. Chapter 19. Naruto walked among the trees, back to the waterfall of truth. Before he had been skeptical about his inner darkness, but now he was more at peace with the part of himself that was too trusting and cheerful. He didn't begrudge that part of him, nor was he jealous. He had chosen the path of an S-ranked member of Akatsuki, and being too trusting and cheerful was a quick ticket to a shallow grave. Still, he understood what his other half had been saying, and he was prepared to trust others, even if only a few. But not without the means to prevent betrayal. He would trust, but if that trust was misplaced, being able to access the kind of destruction that Killer Bee had used would be useful in staying alive. He arrived at his destination without running into anyone, which made sense since Deidara had apparently killed them all. He took a seat on the small patch of earth in front of the waterfall and closed his eyes. Ready to start trusting people? Asked his doppelganger. Naruto opened his eyes to see himself with an enormous grin and contrasting black and red eyes that did not fit with his trust and love everyone personality. Naruto looked down at the extended hand and smiled sadly. He had only known this other Naruto a short time, but apparently being sickeningly happy and trusting did make it really easy to make friends. He had no idea what would happen, but somewhere deep inside, he knew it would be the last time he talked to his other half. Let's do this, said Naruto, grasping his copy's hand. Hokage continued to smile, even as he dissolved in a slowly brightening light. Who knows? Maybe I'll make some more friends wherever I end up. You make more friends too though, just in case. In seconds, Naruto's friendlier half was gone, leaving him feeling lighter than he had in a long time. He closed his eyes and smirked a little. Come on out, B. I know you're there. Sure enough, Killer Bee emerged from behind a tree, looking like he'd been through hell and back. At your sensing skill, I cannot scoff. You knew that was just the horn you cut off. I'm wondering why you let me go. It's clear that you're a regular dynamo. I've been hunting jinchuriki for years, so don't think I've suddenly grown a conscience. I just learned that trusting people might not be so bad, and you gave me a perfect opportunity to deny just letting just go with that horn clone trick, said Naruto, turning around slowly. So how about you return the favor and show me that next step of mastering the nine tails? Killer Bee grinned like a madman. Follow me and you will see what it means to be a jinchuriki. I don't have time to teach the tailed beast ball, but from my demonstration, you should have seen all. Naruto nodded understandingly. Killer Bee likely knew he survived because he had dropped enough hints around Naruto about something irresistible, controlling the might of the most powerful tailed beast. The moment Killer Bee's usefulness ran out, or it became too much trouble to protect him, the eight tails jinchuriki would be on his own. The tailed beast ball itself wouldn't be too hard to learn, thought Naruto naively, as he followed Killer Bee through the waterfall of truth to a temple inside of the cave behind the waterfall. The tailed beast ball was just a scaled-up version of the Rasengan, and it was likely where the fourth Hokage had derived the idea for the technique to begin with. Naruto figured the hardest part would be getting access to the tailed beast chakra required, and then passing it off as not tailed beast chakra if he ever used it in front of witnesses. Though he worked with Deidara, and she would either be understanding or no longer Naruto's partner. Place your head into the statue's mouth. If you still have hate, things will quickly go south. These statues are all of one who failed. Heads are kept by those who prevailed. Naruto knew that Sage Mode would make his skin nearly invulnerable, but one didn't just dismiss warnings of ancient traps. The headless statues around him had apparently all been jinchuriki, and they had likely had defensive techniques as well. He tentatively stuck his head into the mouth on the wall as Killer Bee watched, unusually silent and solemn. Naruto's eyes, which had been widened in fear, narrowed in disbelief and annoyance at Killer Bee, who had the decency to look sheepish, as he pulled his head out of the statue's mouth. Ha ha ha, I was just joking. All these statues are simply broken. Go through that door and give the 9 tails a bout. And with that said, Killer Bee is out. Yeah. Killer Bee raised his fist to the air dramatically and left Naruto alone in the cave temple. The jinchuriki of the mightiest tailed beast looked through the door that had opened when he pressed the hidden switch inside the statue of the 2 tails head. The room was strange, appearing to have no actual boundaries and just being a sea of yellowish light. Still, it had a solid enough floor, which Naruto sat on as he did something he had never done before. Contact the 9 tails. It turned out to be easier than expected, and Naruto opened his eyes to find himself standing in an area that appeared far less peaceful on a shallow pool of oil from Mount Myobokuzen. Looking up though, Naruto stopped thinking about the concrete sewer that the oil was in, even though it should evaporate anywhere but the mountain. A jail cell with bars that stretched up into the distance holding back the most powerful thing ever could do that. To what do I owe the pleasure of you coming her? The likable one going away just isn't enough cosmic punishment, is it? Naruto wasn't surprised that the 9 tails could talk, but he was taken aback by how depressed and bored the creature seemed. The moron finally wins me over after years of trying to be my friend and then just leaves. Typical. What are you talking about? Asked Naruto, suddenly a bit less eager to forcefully fight the beast. I was stuck here, alone but for that insufferably happy idiot. He eventually managed to wear me down, and then he disappears. The 9 tails opened one blood-red eye to look at Naruto and scoffed. So go ahead. Challenge me, and I'll kill you and escape. You can't win when the stupid trusting one is still running about. Actually, he and I reached an understanding. I guess you could say he and I are one now, said Naruto, figuring that he could remove the large seal on the 9 tails cage while he talked. He slowly pulled off the slip of paper that literally said, seal, and watched the spiral underneath collapse in on itself. So I suppose I'm the reason he left. The 9 tails had been content to crush the puny human with the puny ninjutsu and escape this puny prison, content that the puny human knew no puny ninjutsu capable of harming a being as immortal and almighty as he. Knowing that the puny human had no more insecurities left to actively exploit into spirit-breaking doubt made the tailed beast realize that it might actually lose. Knowing that the puny human had robbed him of his only passable excuse of a friend in over 1,000 years made him absolutely livid on top of that. So the 9 tails would crush the puny human, eat his soul, escape, and eat his actual body just for fun. With a furious roar, the 9 tails blew open the metal gates that had held it at bay for so long, ready to tear the puny human with the puny ninjutsu limb from limb as painfully as possible. I never thought this plan would actually work, said Zetsu's disbelief. Of course it will work. It's Pain's plan, retorted his other half. Silence, commanded the god himself. Just do your part and the plan will succeed. And what is your part of the plan? It wasn't that Pain had managed to forget his own plan, but Zetsu had once worked directly for Madara, so it never hurt to be too careful. Zetsu's white half began to glance around nervously, and it was up to his dark side to answer the question. We get close to the 5 Kage and ensure that they do what we want them to. Zetsu turned his head to the side as he began merge with the ground beneath him. Would you like us to deal with the intruders? No. I think I'll deal with them personally, said Akatsuki's leader as he came in from the rain. Zetsu shrugged, and became indistinguishable from the floor before leaving. Almost to himself, Pain spoke aloud as he looked to the base of the skyscrapers where his technique had sensed 3 chakra signatures that didn't belong. It has been a long time, hasn't it, sensei? They had gotten the hang of not being flung around every other second quickly, but the ride from the border to the village hidden in the rain wasn't one either Anbu member wanted to repeat. The tiny frog had traversed the distance from the border to the village as quickly as it could, and then regurgitated the 3 ninja back to their proper size. Well, that was fun, said Jiraiya as he slapped the 2 elite ninjas that had been trained to suppress and eliminate emotions on the back. Do you want to get a bite to eat, or fight the leader of an international terrorist organization collecting the most powerful creatures in existence first? Neither Root nor regular Anbu could tell if the legendary Sannin was joking or not. Finally, the Anbu member that had been trained to put the mission before his own life decided to get the Toad Sage back on track. We should get in and out as quickly as possible. The less time we have to be detected, the less time they have to prepare, he said, glancing left and right under his blank white mask. Training methodology aside, the Anbu member assigned by Tsunade agreed. Well, if you two don't want us being discovered, you'll need to remove your masks and tell me your names. Nothing arouses suspicion like me addressing 2 hooded and masked individuals as Anbu 1 and Anbu 2. The 2 had both been trained to never take off their masks unless their mission, not their lives, depended on it or unless ordered by their respective leaders. Still, Jiraiya had a point, and the 2 hesitantly reached up to remove their masks. Danzo's Root Anbu bore a traditional leaf headband to hold back his light red hair that was also held back in a ponytail. His yellow eyes showed no emotion, which was appropriate, since he had none. Tsunade's Anbu removed his red and green painted animal mask to reveal some of the creepiest eyes Jiraiya had seen since before the Uchiha clan had been massacred. His forehead protector was affixed to a metal plate that framed either side of his face, and his shirt went up his neck and over his chin. With the short brown hair covering the top of his head, only a small portion of his face was visible. You can call me Yamato, said Tsunade's regular forces Anbu. It's my code name for missions. My name is Fu, said the red-haired Root Anbu member. Whether it is my real name or not doesn't matter. It won't exist either way. On that cheery note, Jiraiya led them through the rain, striking a balance between looking like they belonged and hiding in the shadows of the massive metal buildings that shot up into the sky. The team decided on setting a trap for some unsuspecting rain ninja and seeing what they knew of Akatsuki, when they entered a suspiciously large and empty area between the buildings. Look out! Exclaimed Tenzo as he tackled Fu and Jiraiya out of the way of the rain of kunai made from what appeared to be paper that struck the ground where they had been standing. The wood-style user had been fortunate to be looking up at the moment, or else they might have all met a quick end unbecoming of 3 elite ninja. I told you to simply deal with the others. Jiraiya looked upwards towards the sound of the voice and was shocked at what he saw. I would handle our old sensei. The woman was unmistakably Konan, she was even wearing the origami flower from all those years ago in her blue hair, though he doubted it was the same one. What surprised him was the man she was standing next to. His eyes were closed, as if in thought, and Jiraiya struggled for a second to remember who he was. It had been years, and the many piercings did little to increase the resemblance between the Akatsuki member before him and the child he had once known. But the spiked orange hair pulled memories of the 3rd orphan he had trained to the surface. Yahiko. Glad to see you're still alive, but I was under the impression that it was Nagato leading Akatsuki, shouted Jiraiya. The orange-haired man sighed sadly, as if he were disappointed in Jiraiya before leaping down to their level. Konan descended as well, far more gracefully upon wings of paper that appeared to be made from her own legs. That solved the mystery of the paper kunai. Nagato is dead. As is Yahiko. Jiraiya was certainly confused now. All that remains is pain, said Akatsuki's leader as he opened his eyes. The two Anbu members were aghast at the sight of the most legendary bloodline of all time, and even Jiraiya was taken aback a bit. Training his purple-ringed eyes on the three ninja, Pain continued in a commanding tone. Shall I give you a fraction of that pain? Without waiting for a response, Konan swung her hand upwards, and several rectangles of paper flew out of the sleeve of her Akatsuki cloak. They were all easily dodged, but Jiraiya was the one to notice the complex seal work inscribed on either side of the paper projectiles. Dodge. Tenzo and Fu jumped to the left and Jiraiya to the right, as per the plan. They were just here to stall any other Akatsuki members that tried to interfere with Jiraiya's fight with the leader of Akatsuki, and if Akatsuki tried to separate them, then that was fine by them. The tags exploded violently, but with the advance warning given by Jiraiya, none of them were hurt. Fu and Tenzo nodded to each other and ran down an alley away from the two stronger ninja there. As per her orders, Konan flew off after them, launching paper sheets hardened by chakra to be tougher than steel. Jiraiya turned to Pain, and was surprised to see two other people wearing Akatsuki cloaks, each with hair of an identical shade of orange and similar piercings embedded in their faces. But the shocking thing was their eyes. It was easy enough to believe that Nagato had died at some point in the past and Yahiko had taken his Rinnegan. Kakashi was living proof that such a thing could be done. But in no way did Jiraiya believe that there were two other people with the same bloodline that had lay dormant for roughly 1,000 years at the same time. Yet three people with identical hair and eyes stood before Jiraiya, daring him to find out their secret. One thing was for sure, he would need to even the odds a bit before he could really fight three users of the Rinnegan. Despite having trained Nagato, he really only knew what legends had said about them. Controlling all 5 chakra natures did seem useful and powerful, but not the kind of powerful that let you inspire fear in the hearts of 9 other S-ranked ninja. Jiraiya remembered a time where Sage Mode would have required minutes of gathering enough chakra to summon Fukasaku and Shima, leaving him vulnerable to almost anyone he couldn't dispatch with only his legs. He had spent a good deal of time trying to master Sage Mode to catch up with the younger sage he needed to defeat, and while he never quite got to the level of unconsciously absorbing natural chakra at all times, Jiraiya did get a lot better at summoning the 2 elder toads. The 2 new arrival bearing the Rinnegan rushed him while he ran through the seals to summon the 2 old toads that had trained him. There was a cloud of smoke, and the long-haired Rinnegan user and the Rinnegan user with their orange hair done up in a ponytail were sent flying backwards. Really, Jiraiya? All that training, and you still need to summon us for Sage Mode. Pain knew that Jiraiya could summon toads, but summons small enough to be concealed by the small amount of smoke and useful enough to summon in the first place were rare. The 2 other Rinnegan users skidded to a stop next to the body that had once been Yahiko. Sorry, apologized Jiraiya. As the smoke cleared, the 2 small toads perched on his shoulder became visible, though their cloaks still obscured their lower bodies. But I really can't afford to hold back here. Really, sensei, did you think such low-leveled attacks would actually hurt me? Taunted Pain from beside his similar comrades. I am a god, after all. Oh, so is this the leader of Akatsuki? Naruto never mentioned more than one of him though, asked Shima. Who are these other ones? Jiraiya turned to face the 3 Akatsuki members before him, trying to buy time for Fukasaku and Shima to gather the natural chakra he needed for Sage Mode. It didn't take long, but there was some startup time. I've been meaning to ask that myself. I wasn't aware that there were 3 bearers of the Rinnegan. Pain tilted his head condescendingly. We are one and the same. Just as there are many kinds of pain, there are many kinds of pain. Now come, and learn these pains. Pain raised his hand, and Jiraiya felt something pull him towards the Akatsuki member. At first it was as easy to resist as a small toddler, but after a split second the force increased so much that it ripped Jiraiya off the ground as he hurtled forward. The Pain with a long ponytail ran through some seals Jiraiya knew all too well, and the Sannin was now flying towards the horn of a very large rhino that also had the Rinnegan and similar piercings. Jiraiya refused to believe that a rhino had awoken the most legendary bloodline in all of existence, and the sight made him question the possibility of the other 2 Pains Rinnegan being real. He pondered the possibility that all these Pains were just puppets or summons of some kind as he righted himself midair and ran up the rhino's horn. The beast flicked its head up to launch Jiraiya high into the air. He decided to simply observe for the moment and focus on surviving long enough to assess the strength of his opponent. It was thanks to his focus on observation that he saw the first pain, Yahiko, bring his hand down sharply. As if Jiraiya were a puppet in the Akatsuki leader's hand, the Sannin was pulled down into the metal flooring of the hidden rain village. Pulling himself out of the crater, Jiraiya noticed the long-haired Pain moving in on him and ran to intercept, confident in the close combat capabilities of Sage Mode. The long-haired Pain dodged around the extension of Jiraiya's blow as if he could see it. Which made total sense since he had the most powerful eyes in the world. The Akatsuki member, leader, reached out to place one hand on Jiraiya's head, as if he planned to crush the Sannin's head like a grape with one hand. The orange-haired ninja ripped his hand away, and a blue outline of Jiraiya's chakra was pulled out. A split second later Jiraiya disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Smirking at the success of his shadow clone and slightly worried by the ease with which it had been dispatched, the real Jiraiya began his counterattack. From behind the original body that may or may not have been Yahiko, Jiraiya launched the fastest attack with wide range he had to capitalize on the opening before Pain's other Pains could warn him. Sage Art. Hair Needle Senbon. Jiraiya didn't want to say the name of the attack, but it was mostly for Fukusaku and Shima's benefit, and Pain wouldn't have time to react anyway. Or so Jiraiya thought, until his sharpened and hardened hair needles stopped mid-air and came flying straight back at him. Jiraiya knew that an attack empowered by his own Sage Mode wouldn't even be slowed down by Sage Mode's defensive abilities, and he was hard-pressed to escape being turned into a pincushion. Taunting Jiraiya with his nonchalance, Pain turned around slowly to face his old sensei. When you left us, you said we were able to defend ourselves. Well, sensei. Have we survived to your satisfaction? He asked mockingly. Sage Art. Bath of boiling oil. Not bothering to respond, Jiraiya launched a collaboration technique with both elder toads. Fukusaku provided a stream of wind to propel the attack, while Jiraiya spat out enough toad oil to constitute a tsunami. Shima spewed out a stream of fire to ignite the whole thing into a wave of flaming death. The three Pains didn't bother to move, except for the rhino summoning one to run through the seals for another summon. Jiraiya doubted that there was a summon alive who could block a collaboration between three sages. Clearly Jiraiya was wrong though, as the wave of fire shrunk down until it was absorbed enough for Jiraiya to see the fourth man that had appeared, presumably summoned. The newcomer had orange hair slicked back under his hidden rain forehead protector. His piercings were far larger than the other three, but no less numerous, and there was a transparent shield around him where the three sages' collaboration technique had been sucked into. Perhaps the thing that annoyed Jiraiya the most though were the purple ringed eyes in his head. I thought you only trained one kid with the Rinnegan, deadpanned Fukusaku. Jiraiya glared at the small toad on his shoulder before returning his attention to the four people who were apparently all one man named Pain. There are many kinds of pain. You've just invited one more upon yourself, said the body of Pain that looked like Yahiko. He raised his hand once more, and Jiraiya once more found himself yanked towards Pain. Even knowing what was coming and fixing himself to the ground with chakra did no good, all he got for his trouble was pulling a chunk of metal flooring along with him. He noticed the new Pain and the one that had destroyed his shadow clone coming at him. Deciding that he didn't want whatever happened to his shadow clone happening to him, Jiraiya flipped around and launched a bullet of fire at the two Pains. Only to understand what had happened to his bath of boiling oil earlier. The ability to absorb chakra wasn't anything unheard of, but it was certainly rare and definitely powerful. Jiraiya wasn't going to let something like that stop him though. The Sannin reached down to get some kind of grip and used his momentum to propel a kick at his opponent and try to take off his opponent's head. Pain dodged the blow easily, but Jiraiya only smirked as he brought his legs together on Pain's outstretched arm, easily breaking it. Not satisfied, Jiraiya torqued his body around to bring a Rasengan down on his opponent's head. Sensing the chakra-absorbing Pain, Jiraiya spun around and ducked beneath a long black rod that seemed to be made of the same material as Pain's piercings. The sage reached up and grabbed the black metal, using it to pick Pain up off the ground and slam him back down. Pain was no fool though, and he snapped the rod off right past his wrist. He fell gracefully to the ground, but barely dodged the rod being brought down on him anyway. The body of pain that resembled Yahiko raised his hand again, and Jiraiya prepared himself to be pulled towards Akatsuki's leader. Instead, he felt as if a solid brick wall had been shot at him at high speeds to send him flying away. Hey, boy, chided Fukasaku. You don't stand a chance against all three of these pain guys at once. We need to separate them. You're crazy, ya old coot, responded Shima from Jiraiya's other shoulder. Jiraiya is clearly winning here. Just keep doing what you're doing, Jiraiya. You're both right, said Jiraiya, drawing confused looks from the toads as he stared down Pain. You two use the toad confrontation chant, I'll distract them until then. I could use some cover before you begin though. Fukasaku grumbled about dry throats and embarrassment from singing at his old age, but he pulled out several purple spheres from under his cloak. The toad elder slammed the balls onto the ground, where they burst in a massive cloud of purple smoke that enveloped the entire area. The smokescreen didn't last long though, as a giant bird with 3 legs and a drill-like beak that Pain had summoned flapped its wings to blow the smoke away. Where Jiraiya had been standing was a hole in the ground where the Sannin had burrowed away. The 3 remaining Pains looked around calmly for where the Sannin would emerge, facing each other in a triangle of sorts. The sensory powers of Sage Mode allowed Jiraiya to pinpoint the location of his target. He emerged from the ground directly behind the summoning Pain, Rasengan in hand. The blind spot attack proved strangely ineffective though, as Pain summoned a fat panda behind himself without even looking. The panda took the attack head-on and disappeared in a puff of smoke as quickly as it had come. The Rinnegan-bearing bear had served its purpose though, and the 3 Pains regrouped to stand next to each other. Jiraiya flipped upwards as the large bird smashed its beak into the ground and delivered a powerful kick to send the summon packing. Damn, I was sure I had a blind spot. I don't remember the Rinnegan being able to see behind itself like the Byakugan, wondered Jiraiya aloud. But he hasn't used any of the Rinnegan powers that are actually known either. Are you two ready yet? A low hum had begun to come from the 2 toads on Jiraiya's shoulders, and their glares told Jiraiya that the old toads needed more time. Resolved to buy them the time he needed, Jiraiya readied himself for combat once more. He dashed forward, opting to engage the Pain that could absorb chakra in hand-to-hand combat, where he could absorb nothing. Pain still had those black rods though, which he used efficiently to try and keep the sage at a distance. Jiraiya ducked under one swing that went a tad wide and dashed in to deliver a crippling blow. The Sage Mode enhanced punch sent Pain flying backwards, but he had the presence of mind to extend another black metal rod out from his cloak and stab Jiraiya's shoulder. The pain was something unimaginable. Jiraiya had been tortured before, but the pain he felt from just a shallow shoulder wound was excruciating. With a grunt of effort, Jiraiya managed to pull the metal out of his shoulder, though it felt like his body was fighting him every inch of the way. Jiraiya looked up to see that while the chakra-absorbing Pain was unmoving, the long-haired Pain whose head he had pulped with a Rasengan was standing back up, as healthy as could be. Jiraiya's eyes widened in surprise at Pain's apparent ability to raise the dead and he quickly summoned a small messenger toad. Quickly, get that corpse out of here. The toad thought for a second about patronizing the old pervert, as he had never actually gotten the chance before, but the Sannin's tone firmly established that now was not the time. Determined to heckle the older summoner next time they met, the small blue toad hopped onto the dead body of Pain and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. That seemed to irritate the other Pains, as their brows furrowed in annoyance. The leader of Akatsuki raised his hand once more, and Jiraiya was pulled off of his feet. The resurrected Pain slammed his hand on the ground to send a Rinnegan-bearing centipede at Jiraiya. The insect coiled itself mid-air to restrain the Sannin, and the long-haired Pain moved in for the kill. And then they stopped. Jiraiya had tuned out the noise coming from right next to both of his ears, but he now noticed that Fukasaku and Shima were both belting out a duet of illusion-inducing toad song. The 3 Pains that were within earshot were likely seeing a false world where they were restrained by 4 samurai toads holding them inside a small floating cube. Knowing that Fukasaku and Shima couldn't hold their song for long before their throats gave out, Jiraiya quickly broke out of Centipede, breaking it into segments. He summoned 3 of the stone swords of Mount Myobokuzan, taking no chances with Pain's resurrection abilities. The swords impaled the 3 Pains, and even though it almost physically hurt Jiraiya to stab one who was once his beloved student, he forced himself to do so. Seeing it finished, Jiraiya stopped Sage Mode as the two toads on his shoulders began to hack and cough. The remnants of Sage Mode were still around though, and they allowed him to barely sense and dodge the incoming attack. It was likely a high-grade explosive note, as the scorch marks from the blast could testify. Jiraiya whirled around in a panic to find his new attacker, only to lay eyes on two more people with orange hair, many piercings, and Rinnegan eyes. Only one had orange hair though, as the other was entirely bald, and doing a very good job at unnerving Jiraiya with his creepy grin. The bald Pain reached down, sprouting another arm to grab all three fallen Pains as the one with hair ran through some seals. A feeling of death fell over Jiraiya as a pale face rose up from the ground behind Pain, and the three corpses were thrown into its mouth. After a second or two of chewing that Jiraiya spent in shocked horror, the mouth opened, and all three Pains stepped through as if Jiraiya hadn't just shoved a sword through their chests. Pain is eternal sensei, said the Pain that looked like Yahiko. Do you understand now? Jiraiya was broken from his paralyzed state as a large flaming explosion tore out of one of the adjacent alleys. Tumbling out of the fire came Tenzo, who rolled along the ground to put himself out. I'm sorry Lord Jiraiya, apologized Tenzo. We were barely holding her off, and when Fu died, I knew it was only a matter of time until she came to reinforce Pain. Before he died, Fu said we needed to escape. Damn it, swore Jiraiya. One part of him wanted to stay and try to defeat his wayward students. But an even larger part of himself remembered Tsunade's last words to him. He had sworn that he would come back alive. He tried to rationalize the decision to himself, arguing internally that the mission hadn't been a complete failure. They had gained some new information on Akatsuki that might be invaluable in the future, and he had killed one of the Pains. But deep down he knew he was being selfish. The Great Toad Sage had told him that he, pervert without equal, would train someone who would either destroy the world or save it, and he would make a choice that would make the difference. But in this moment, he didn't want the responsibility. He wanted to believe Shima, who said that the sage's prophecies were a load of malarkey. He wanted to return home, safe and sound. Tenzo wanted that too. You retreat, Lord Jiraiya, he shouted as he faced Konan and all five remaining Pains. It was a testament to his training that the number of foes quintupling didn't faze him at all. Fu and I were chosen because we were expendable, but if you were killed, it would start a war for sure. Very well then. Jiraiya looked up in shock at Pain's words. Akatsuki strives for peace, and the chaos of war is counterproductive to our goals. You may leave, and remember this day, this Pain. Perhaps when Akatsuki accomplishes our goal, you will survive. Perhaps not. For someone who was now 1/6 dead, Pain seemed almost eager to brush off Jiraiya's invasion and assault. Weighing the choices mentally, Jiraiya debated with himself under the stares of Tenzo and Akatsuki's leader. Sighing heavily, he came to a decision. We're leaving, Tenzo. Shima, if you could help him. Asked Jiraiya. Shima hopped off of Jiraiya's shoulder and onto Tenzo's, and the two disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Are you sure that that was a good idea? It wasn't often that Konan questioned her childhood friend and leader, but it wasn't often he let such an attack slide. Usually, any infringement against his authority ended with death. Yes, I am sure, responded Pain as he turned to leave, and Konan quickly followed. The nations must be at their strongest to be broken completely, or else others will rise up once more. The nations must be united, and that cannot happen if they are at war. Let Zetsu do his part, and we will be ready. The Raikage sat in his office, contemplating what to do with the two ninja in front of him. You know, if your villages ever found out about my harboring their missing ninja, it could lead to war. To their credit, the wounded Uchiha and the jinchuriki of the Seven Tails simply nodded. My village was pretty knocked around by Akatsuki. I doubt they could wage a war, even if they wanted to, said Fu, tossing her hand over her shoulder noncommittally. And I only care about stopping Akatsuki, replied the Uchiha stoically. As long as your village protects Fu, it doesn't matter to me whether or not I have your protection. Well spoken, said the Raikage thoughtfully. Thought had never been his strong suit, but he was more than capable of it. Granted, we have no real way of knowing you aren't just a traveler, set upon by Akatsuki near our village. I'm sure no village could object to that. Sasuke let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. Just then, the door burst open. The Raikage was up and covered in lightning, and Sasuke was ready to brawl, Sharingan blazing. Until he was rather painfully reminded that his left eye had recovered, but his right eye was now unusable. The hidden clouds healers could have perhaps done the operation more safely, but Sasuke was loath to hand Itachi's hard-won Sharingan over to anyone. And he paid for it now with searing pain and a spurt of blood from his right eye. The Raikage lowered his lightning armor when he identified the newcomer, and Sasuke was still trying his best not to scream in pain while writhing on the floor. The Raikage sat down in his chair, and Fu contemplated poking Sasuke with a stick as he convulsed. What are you doing here, Motoi? You're supposed to be with my brother. That's Jutsu, sir. Akatsuki has captured him. The Raikage's response was to smash his desk to pieces. We don't know how they found us. We need to launch a counterstrike to get him back. You're right, but Akatsuki is too strong to fight together. If he's been taken back to their base, we don't stand a chance. And I'd be shocked if they hadn't gotten him there by now. The Raikage sat down once more in front of his desk's remains. What we need to do now, is find a way to get revenge on those Akatsuki bastards. From his position on the floor, Sasuke couldn't agree more. Lord Raikage, it would take all villages working together to defeat Akatsuki all at once, said Motoi in distress. The Raikage stood p and raised his fist to the sky. If it takes all the villages working together, then I'll run to each village and convince them myself. With his piece said, the Raikage turned, and leapt through the window of his office, smashing whatever was unfortunate enough to be where he landed. Naruto dodged the 9 massive tails that came crashing down on him, only for a large paw to swipe him away in contempt. Enraging a beast of pure rage might not have been one of Naruto's best ideas. Still, Sage Mode worked even in this strange mind world. It even felt easier, perhaps because his real body wasn't moving at all. Either way, the enhanced defenses were all that had kept him from being turned into mincemeat, mindscape or not. And it occurred to him for the umpteenth time since releasing the beast that without the toads, he had no real idea on even what he needed to do to master the 9 tails as Killer Bee had put it. He jumped upwards to avoid more tails that came crashing down, but could only hold out his hands to try and stop the 9 tails' front paws from crushing him. It failed spectacularly, and the 9 tails was soon squeezing him like a doll. Other than a giant 9-tailed fox intent on tearing him limb from limb, Naruto had thought himself alone in his mindscape. So he was understandably surprised when another voice spoke up from behind him. I'd appreciate it if you dropped my son. I'd hate to have to give you another beating. Naruto couldn't turn around while he was being held tightly by the 9 tails, but the tailed beast's response removed any doubt about who was standing behind him. Fourth Hokage, growled the 9 tails. Damn you. Naruto watched as several large tails shot past him, presumably to destroy the beast's most hated foe. Naruto also saw a 3-pronged kunai flying in the other direction out of the corner of his eye. He heard the tails impact the ground, but the 4th Hokage was right in front of him, and Naruto gasped in shock. He was now surprised that Jiraiya hadn't made the connection from a passing glance. Other than his golden sage mode eyes and the different color of their cloaks, Naruto was a spitting image of the 4th Hokage. The golden-haired man swung his hand down, and smashed the Rasengan into the 9 tails' wrist, forcing it to release Naruto. Naruto dropped next to the 4th Hokage as the 9 tails recovered and snarled at the two of them. How? Asked Naruto incredulously. You're dead. I suppose I am. Responded the legendary ninja nonchalantly. I'm just an imprint of chakra sealed inside you. I had kind of sacrificed my soul 2 times over before then though, so I can't hang around for long. I have enough chakra to redo the seal though, if you don't want to fight the 9 tails. Naruto considered the choice, and it was if time slowed for him to think. It very well might have, since they were all currently inside his mind. I appreciate the offer, but I need to be strong enough to do the right thing, and this is the only way to get that power soon enough to make a difference. The fourth Hokage smiled at his son's response. The Nine Tails did not. You seek to take my power. You are but a speck of my hatred. An ant for me to crush. It shouted angrily, though some part of it feared being sealed by the Hokage once more. He sure is loud, isn't he? Asked the fourth Hokage, brushing off the Nine Tails' rage. I suppose I'll let you off with a little bit of help then. You are my son, and though I might not be proud of all you've done, I am proud of you. Despite never having met his father, the words still threatened to bring tears to Naruto's eyes. Minato reached out and ruffled his son's hair, and Naruto hardly noticed his Akatsuki cloak slowly turning red, with the black settling into flames on the bottom. And the secret to this game is chakra. Pull his out with yours, but don't let him do the same. Be careful, I love you. With his piece said, Minato Namikaze began to fade out of existence in a white light. With his father gone, Naruto allowed himself to shed a single tear, before turning back to the Nine Tails, which seemed to have regained some of its courage now that its archenemy was gone once more. Sorry, but I'm going to take that chakra of yours, and use it as insurance in case doing what I should have done years ago turns out to be a bad idea. Over my dead body, roared the Nine Tails, swinging its paw down on Naruto again. This time though, the sage caught the appendage and used it to swing the Nine Tails above his head and into the ground. Leaping up like a toad, Naruto jumped high above the tailed beast as it lay on its back. Not done yet, yelled Naruto as he began to fall toward the Nine Tails' chest, hands practically glowing with sage chakra. You little brat, spat the Nine Tails as it reached up to grab him out of midair. Naruto used his feet to roll himself between the Nine Tails' fingers, and launched himself downwards all the faster. The blows collided solidly with the Nine Tails' chest, stunning the beast temporarily. Naruto jumped down to the base of the fox's tails and grabbed hold of the surprisingly fluffy tail and tried to grab onto the chakra itself. Suddenly, two more hands placed themselves next to his and pulled, this time drawing out a trail of the beast's chakra. Looking over his shoulder, Naruto came face to face with his smiling doppelganger from the Waterfall of Truth. He might be my friend, but he really does need to learn a lesson in humility, explained the trusting Naruto that had somehow managed to annoy the Nine Tails into friendship. The two copies of Naruto managed to pull out a good length of chakra before the Nine Tails came to its senses after the blow. Think again, bellowed the Nine Tails. The blue chakra that Naruto had been pulling on began to turn red as a more hate-filled chakra seeped out from the Nine Tails' body. Naruto gasped in shock as the red chakra completely engulfed the chakra projection behind him. Looking in the water around his feet, Naruto noticed that his left eye had become pitch black, save for the blood-red pupil. The world around him faded to black, as he heard the voices of the Nine Tails' hatred whispering to him. Curse you, I hate you, destroy everything. Those damned eyes, just a weapon, too powerful, keep the world at bay, destroy everything. Naruto clutched his head in pain as the voice of the Nine Tails pounded away at his skull. Falling to his knees, Naruto was only vaguely aware of the Nine Tails sitting up in triumph. Opening his eyes, Naruto glimpsed a small light, bright enough to illuminate the darkness he was in a bit. Then he heard another voice as the light before him began to grow. This voice was softer, much gentler than the enraged shouts of the Nine Tails. I love you, my son, grow up big and strong, eat your vegetables. The last one left Naruto a bit confused, but every word made the throbbing in his head go away. The light between him and the Nine Tails grew in intensity until it was too blinding to look at. Naruto opened his eyes once he sensed the light fade to tolerable levels, and was surprised to see that the Nine Tails was gone. In its place was a woman about as tall as he was, with bright red hair that fell down to her legs. Naruto couldn't believe it. Are you, the Nine Tails? The question earned him a slap across the face, but Naruto was just too stunned to react. That's for not recognizing your own mother. She shouted. The woman in front of him thought for a moment, then slapped him again. And that's for joining a terrorist organization intent of taking over the world. I mean really. Naruto had known he was the son of Minato Namikaze, fourth Hokage and last Toad Summoner, for years now, but he had never seen so much as a picture of his mother. He was still silent and uncomprehending when his mother gave him a hug. And that's for being my son. You're really my mom. Asked Naruto as his eyes threatened to tear up. She moved away from him then, holding him at an arm's length to look at him testily. Of course I am. Kushina Uzumaki, wife of the fourth Hokage and mother of one Naruto Uzumaki, she replied. Naruto's brain was almost fried at this point, and he desperately grasped for anything to talk about, almost fearful that she would disappear if he didn't keep talking with her. Like your hair. Naruto felt like going back to where he had been and letting the Nine Tails eat him. He was meeting his mother, who was probably dead, and all he could think of was, I like your hair. Luckily, his mother seemed to enjoy the compliment, running a hand through her hair appreciatively. Only one other man has ever complimented my hair, and I married him, said Kushina, reminiscing her romance with Minato. That's all it took? Asked Naruto in surprise. He flinched as his mother raised her hand to smack him again. He really needed to learn when to stop talking. She managed to stop herself though, but Naruto made a mental note to think before blurting out whatever came to mind. If you must know, he had just saved me from a group of cloud ninja when he complimented me, so it was a tad more romantic than that, she chided. And he sealed some of my chakra into your seal too, so I could meet you when you were all grown up. I was in a bit better shape than he was at the time, so I have a bit more time to chat. Naruto searched for any questions in his mind, and barely stopped himself from asking why she had been kidnapped in the first place. Why did you let yourself get sealed in here though? If you hadn't, you could have met me in the real world. Kushina smiled sadly. I was already dying. Until it was used to attack the village, the Nine Tails was sealed somewhere, you know. Naruto's eyes widened at the implications. Not only had he been killing people like himself with Akatsuki, he had been killing people like his own mother. The realization only solidified his choice. I'm sorry for what I've done as a member of Akatsuki. I'm trying to atone, but I'm nowhere near strong enough to stop them as I am. That's why I'm not going to fight them as an Akatsuki member, but as the jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Kushina's smile widened, reaching her eyes. Looking into the proud face of his mother, Naruto felt oddly content and safe, despite the danger that awaited him. I'll help you out with the fuzzball then, said Kushina as Naruto snickered at the fact that his mom addressed the Nine Tails as fuzzball. I have enough chakra left to be useful, but before we do this, if you ever meet a masked man claiming to be Madara Uchiha, kill him. Naruto was slightly taken aback by the smile his mother wore while telling him to kill someone, though Madara Uchiha was supposed to be dead, so he supposed it was fair. The bright world dimmed a bit, and his mother faded with the light. In seconds, he was staring back at the Nine Tails as if only a few seconds had passed, if that. I feel happy, said Naruto, wearing a grin he would have usually called stupid. With one great tug, he pulled off the bit of chakra he had stolen from the Nine Tails. The beast roared in anger as it found its feet and pulled away its tails. You little brat, shouted the fuzzball. You think you can handle my power? I'll kill you. Before it could make good on the threat, golden chains made of pure chakra burst from the ground beneath the fox's feet and wrapped around it. The chains tightened sharply, pulling the Nine Tails away from Naruto, who stood calmly with a huge grin plastered on his face. Don't get full of yourself. Naruto saw the ball of ominous chakra form in front of the Nine Tails' mouth, though he had never seen it compact like it did now. By the time it was fully charged, the sphere was small enough to fit in the palm of Naruto's hand, and the Nine Tails bit down hard on it. The Nine Tails' cheeks swelled like a squirrel with a hoard of nuts, before it opened its mouth to fire a concentrated laser of chakra. The blast was smaller and faster than Killer Bee's tailed beast bomb, but Naruto was willing to bet it had just as much power, if not more. Which left the question of how to not get hit by it. It was a crazy idea, one that usually wouldn't warrant a second thought. But Naruto didn't have time to weigh the pros and cons of an idea at the moment. If he was supposed to take the Nine Tails chakra, then was the fox an idiot for launching pure chakra at him? Probably not, and Naruto was going to lose an arm for such an idiotic plan. But he still tried it. Naruto leapt over the laser of chakra, and reached into it to try and pull out some of the chakra. In reality, his hand would have been vaporized, because trying to grab chakra was insane unless you had a technique that let you do it. But here, grabbing chakra was how you won. Naruto's hand still felt like it was being burned, doused in vinegar, and eaten off by ants, but he managed to pull several small orbs of chakra from the laser as it scorched him from sheer proximity. The Nine-Tails noticed though, and was not pleased. The fox was about to raise its head, and therefore the laser of death, when Chin shot out of the ground and snapped its mouth shut. Fighting against the chains, the Nine-Tails reared up backwards and tried to open its mouth. It managed to snap the chains wrapped around its mouth with a victorious roar, and noticed what Naruto was doing in horror and rage. Held between Naruto's hands was a small ball of dark chakra that was slowly being added to by the spheres of chakra he had stolen from the Nine-Tails tailed beast laser. Go ahead and try, fool. My power is impossible to balance. If you insist on killing yourself trying, you won't hear me complaining. Shut up, fuzzball, shouted Naruto. I've got a lot of people counting on me to beat you, so don't think I'll just give up. Little brat, bellowed the fox, angry that Kushina had apparently told her son of her affectionate nickname for the mightiest tailed beast. You cannot handle the power of a tailed beast ball. I wouldn't bet on it, said Naruto smugly as the black sphere in his hands became a swirling ball of death. The Rasengan is in my blood, and I've spent my whole life balancing dangerous chakras. Besides, Killer Bee let slip the recipe. 8 parts black and 2 parts white. Naruto ran at the Nine-Tails quickly. The tailed beast ball wins any fight. The Nine-Tails roared in fury, and the sheer air pressure almost stopped Naruto's forward progress. But the defiant sage didn't stop. Naruto skillfully weaved between the Nine-Tails that came crashing down, still carrying his miniature tailed beast ball. The Nine-Tails readied another tailed beast laser to atomize the pesky jinchuriki before it, but the chakra chains around it yanked hard once before fading. The tug was enough to pull the Nine-Tails up onto 2 feet and ruin its concentration before the chains disappeared. The Nine-Tails stumbled back as Naruto leapt up to chest level. It's over, he shouted as he placed one hand on the Nine-Tails and grabbed onto the beast's chakra. He pulled his other hand back and slammed it into the tailed beast's chest. The small black ball started off small, but it soon began to destabilize and grow to massive proportions. Soon, the tailed beast ball made of stolen chakra was bigger than the tailed beast it sent flying backwards. It was tough to keep a firm grip, but Naruto managed to hold on firm to the Nine-Tails chakra. When the tailed beast ball detonated and subsided, Naruto saw a nine-tailed fox made entirely of blood-red chakra standing in front of him, while the physical fox was in the distance, looking like it hadn't eaten in years. The giant mass of red chakra slowly flowed into Naruto's outstretched hand. In a flash of light, Naruto looked down at his hands in wonder. Not even his expertise at balancing chakra could keep this power contained. Golden chakra literally rose off of his skin like fire. Don't get cocky. I'll kill you. Naruto looked over at the skinny excuse for a fox that had spoken nonchalantly, but that changed to surprise and horror when he saw what the beast was doing. Above the tailed beast's maw was a tailed beast ball easily 3 times the size of any Naruto had ever seen. Before he could even contemplate how to stop it, the Nine-Tails ran out of energy. The tailed beast ball cracked, and then fell apart like it had been made of stone. You still had that much power left, said Naruto, feeling a bit awed by the beast's strength, even when he had supposedly taken all of its chakra. You really are impressive, aren't you? Naruto almost instinctively knew what to do. He raised his hand and brought it down on the spiral that represented his seal. He twisted the seal, as if turning a key, and red gates rained down from the sky to pin the Nine-Tails to the ground. With that done, Naruto turned to leave, though it turned out to be as easy as opening his eyes in reality. He stood up, stretched his muscles before he collapsed in exhaustion. Despite every one of his muscles screaming in protest, he forced himself to sit up when he heard a familiar voice in his head. We have another one. Naruto sighed heavily as he went outside and sat down on the clay sculpture Deidara had given him. It took off into the air as Naruto sat down and closed his eyes in meditation. The 10 members of Akatsuki looked down at the large gray horn in their midst in disbelief. Their newest member, Orochimaru, was the first to break the silence. So are all jinchuriki just random animal part, or is the eight tails special? No one except perhaps Hidan was in the mood for sarcasm. Huh, guess he must have transformed the horn into a clone of sorts during the explosions of water and blood. I didn't sense a difference, because it was technically his chakra, and the eight tails chakra. Despite knowing he had to sound annoyed and embarrassed with himself, Naruto couldn't quite bring himself to feel bad about Killer Bee's escape. Wait a second, shouted Hidan, and Kakuzu put his hands up to his ears in irritation. There were explosions of blood. Why did you not invite me? I've discovered a jutsu that causes explosions of blood, if you're willing to trade, offered Orochimaru, a nasty glint showing in his gold snake-like eyes. Hidan looked all too willing to part with an arm and a leg to learn a jutsu that caused explosions of blood, but pain interrupted. Enough. This is only a minor setback if the rest goes according to plan. Their leader's silhouette turned to the plant man of the group. Zetsu. Is everything going according to plan? Of course. The Raikage is playing right into our hands, and I'm working on the Hokage as we speak, said Zetsu flippantly. The Kage will follow the Hokage and the Tsuchikage will follow the Raikage. The Mizukage won't risk war by declining. They'll probably meet at the end of the month. Very well then. You will all meet in the land of iron at the end of the month. Be prepared to fight. With that said, Pain's shadowy figure disappeared. The other Akatsuki members followed suit. Before going, Deidara turned to her partner. Did you do what you needed to get done? Naruto nodded, then realized Deidara might not be able to see such subtle gestures through the projection. Yeah, your bird is carrying me back as we speak. He hesitated a bit before continuing. Where are you right now? I need to talk to you, face to face. I'm hanging out in some forest, yeah, said Deidara casually. I'll meet you at the village hidden in the hot springs. Hidan's old village? Asked Naruto, a tad suspicious of walking into a hidden village, even one as small as the hot springs. It's more of a resort town now. That's why Hidan left in the first place, yeah, said Deidara excitedly. We could use a little R&R before we fight the 5 Kage. Naruto sighed, figuring that any place was as good as another. He just felt bad for the inhabitants and vacationers that would get introduced to Deidara's art when he told her. Sound good. I'll see you then. Chapter 20. So you weren't successful in killing him? Asked Tsunade dejectedly. Jiraiya had returned from the assassination mission without Danzo's root Anbu, instead carrying a corpse that apparently belonged to one of Akatsuki's 6 leaders who were also all one person named Pain. Tsunade was still trying to wrap her head around that one. I'm not sure if he can revive this one without the actual body, so we might have decreased his strength a bit, but as for killing off Pain entirely. No such luck, replied Jiraiya. Still though, we did get a lot of information about his abilities, so the mission wasn't a complete failure. With all due respect Lady Hokage, we need to share this information with the villages that are still trying to protect their own jinchuriki. Such information may be vital in stopping Akatsuki, said Tenzo, who had donned his mask once more after they were safe. True, Akatsuki is the biggest threat at the moment, but we can't just discredit the other 4 villages, said Jiraiya. And while we know that the Hidden Cloud is the only villages with jinchuriki left, admitting that would be admitting to spying on them. They probably know we spy on them already, but flaunting it like that would just be asking for a war. Perhaps we could give the warnings and information to all of the villages to remove suspicion that we already know that only the Hidden Cloud has a jinchuriki left, offered Tenzo, standing at a stiff salute. Tsunade propped her head up on her hand as she mulled the idea over. That could work. But there's no way we could call a meeting here or there. We would be too busy suspecting the others of treachery that we wouldn't have time to talk. In the past, summits of the 5 Kage were held in the Land of Iron. There's nothing fun about the place, but you'd have to be insane to upset the samurai, said Jiraiya as the idea began to form in his mind. No one would betray each other there. That could work, said Tsunade, nodding slowly as the idea began to sound better and better. I'll deal with the paperwork, you come up with a plan for handling Pain if he shows up at the summit. You'd have to be insane to try, but Akatsuki fills that role perfectly. Naruto's clay owl had been long since destroyed by a failed experiment with the tailed beast ball. After trying it several more times, he succeeded more often than not, but if it weren't for Sage Mode, he likely wouldn't have survived the first failure. Apparently, adding in Sage Mode chakra changed the balance of chakra needed to keep the whirling ball of death stable. He had been getting better, but he looked like he had just gotten done fighting Akatsuki's leader by the time he arrived at the village hidden in the hot springs. Looking down at the tourist town, he could see why Hidan had left his old village, and why the old ninja village had given up on ninjas. They were fantastic mercenaries, but unless you had the reputation to bring in jobs, people would just go to one of the major hidden villages. And when you had such a good tourist magnet like the hot springs, it was only logical to stop training ninjas. Naruto stopped in thought for a moment, as it occurred to him that Hidan was technically one of the only members of Akatsuki who wasn't a missing ninja since his village no longer existed. Shaking his head, Naruto walked down into the village, looking for Deidara. It didn't take long, since he knew exactly where she would be in a village renowned worldwide for its fantastic hot springs. Stopping outside the museum, Naruto looked down at his partner for a moment before speaking up to break her out of her pouting. So how long did you make it before security had to throw you out? Deidara looked up in surprise, and stared for a second before recognizing Naruto without his Akatsuki cloak. Deidara was wearing civilian clothes as well, since they had decided to not be public enemies today. I made it a full 20 minutes before I couldn't stand it anymore, yeah, said Deidara, standing up and glaring back at the museum. I had to show those idiots what true art was. Or at least get rid of that terrible excuse for art. Naruto smiled a bit at Deidara's new personal record. She had been kicked out by security of every museum they had ever visited, and since all museums had some form of art, Deidara insisted on visiting everyone they could. When they weren't trying to remain incognito, Deidara turned the entire museum into a work of art afterwards. Let's try to refrain from creating any masterpieces until after we visit the hot springs. Alright. But I'm going to turn this place into one big work of art once we're all done resting and relaxing, yeah. Deidara and Naruto began to walk side by side down the street, contemplating how to which hot spring, all of which claimed to be the most relaxing, actually was. Trying to steer conversation about the two's lackluster relaxation and people skills, Deidara broached another topic that had been bothering her. So what was so important that you couldn't say it via the astral projection technique? Naruto almost stumbled at the question, and decided to not simply tell Deidara right out. Have you ever thought of leaving Akatsuki? Deidara laughed a bit at him. You mean you've never tried it? Seeing Naruto's confused look, she elaborated. These rings don't come off, and pain can find out where you are when you're wearing them. Short of cutting off your hand, there's no getting out of Akatsuki. Why would you want to? Naruto looked at the ground, taking a sudden interest in anything that wasn't his partner. I'm having second thoughts about hunting down the jinchuriki. Little late for that now, yeah, scoffed Deidara, before realizing something that made her stop walking forward. Wait, does this mean you let the eight tails escape? Seeing Naruto's guilty look, Deidara dug further. Why are you having second thoughts about this now? We've been hunting them down for years, yeah. Naruto sighed heavily, and prepared to draw on the nine tails chakra to escape if need be. Because I'm a jinchuriki. What are you talking about? All the tailed beasts are accounted for. What tailed beast would even be sealed in you? Deidara was acting cool, though anyone who knew her well enough could see that she was taken by surprise. The leaf ninja only had a part of the nine tails sealed inside of him, likely a bit of residue that began to grow back to its full strength. I'm the jinchuriki of the nine tails. Seeing that Deidara either didn't believe him or didn't want to believe him, Naruto raised his hands together, and a small ball of pure black chakra whirled into existence. Seeing the tailed beast ball, even a miniature one, was enough to convince Deidara. While most civilians couldn't sense it for the moment the attack existed, Deidara recognized the oppressive feeling of tailed beast chakra. Who else knows? She asked, dead serious. Naruto had been prepared to run for his life, and was taken aback at the fact that he wasn't exploding. Just you, and the toads, but they wouldn't tell anyone. The Eight-Tails Jinchuriki figured it out though. Deidara nodded thoughtfully, and it occurred to Naruto that she was thinking of a way to keep his secret from getting out. Okay, no one in Akatsuki knows but us knows, and nobody suspected anything when the Nine Tails was sealed before, said Deidara, still reeling from the revelation. So if Pain's plan goes off without a hitch as is, you're in the clear. Until then, don't do anything out of the ordinary. Naruto was having trouble wrapping his mind around the fact that he had told Deidara his secret, and her first response was to try and protect him. You aren't mad at me? Asked Naruto incredulously. I'm furious at you actually, said Deidara, shooting Naruto a glare that could melt steel. But you're my friend, and friends forgive each other, yeah. Naruto smiled, trying his best not to tear up, glad that he had decided to trust Deidara. His other half was right on some points apparently, it did feel good. And if Akatsuki finds you out, I'm with you. Naruto was rendered speechless for a moment, and when he did find his voice, it sounded raw. Thank you. Deidara grinned and slapped Naruto on the back. Now let's find some hot springs, yeah. Something tells me we'll need the relaxation. The two Akatsuki members continued their walk down the streets of the former ninja village, looking for somewhere to relax in some piping hot water. Man, why do you practice out here? It's so drab. Sasuke had to forcibly kick himself out of combat mode to prevent himself from skewering the new arrival. He turned around to see the Raikage's right-hand man, Darui. The dark-skinned man hadn't seemed interested in anything since Sasuke had met him, and apparently, he hadn't been interested in anything before they had met either. I train here because there's nothing around, said Sasuke, setting a bush on fire with just a look. The black flames consumed the shrub in seconds, and Sasuke focused intently on trying to extinguish it himself. After straining himself, Sasuke managed to tease the black fire into oblivion. If that happened in the village proper, the hidden cloud village would be a patch of scorched earth, and no one would survive trying to put it out. Out here, I risk melting a few rocks and a bush or two. Darui nodded lazily as he processed the information. Well, the Raikage wants to see you. Try not to kill everyone and level the village while you're there. Sasuke scowled at the Cloud Ninja's sarcastic tone as he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Still, Sasuke would have to be stupid to defy the Raikage, and he made his way down from the mountaintop above the village he had been training his eyes on. His right eye was on the mend, though it still pinched a bit if he used it too much. He hadn't tried his luck with Susanoo yet. When he entered the Raikage's office, he saw the muscle-bound village leader lifting a truly ridiculous amount of weight with one hand while the other held important documents to be read. The Raikage looked up as Sasuke entered, dropping the weight to the floor, where they cracked the wood. If Sasuke had learned one thing about the Raikage, it was that he couldn't go so much as blink without causing collateral damage. Ah, Uchiha. I've got something you might like to see. The Raikage beckoned Sasuke closer, and handed the Uchiha the papers he had been holding. Apparently, someone has the same idea as we do. Any thoughts? Sasuke activated his Sharingan for a brief moment to read the documents as quickly as possible. His eyes faded to black while his mind caught up with his eyes and figured out the implications of the papers. He looked up at the Raikage in confusion. The Hidden Leaf wants to call a summit too. That's what it looks like. I wouldn't be surprised if the Land of Iron thought it was a collaboration between us. Sasuke scoffed. The Hidden Cloud wasn't as openly hostile to the Hidden Leaf as the Hidden Rock was, but the only reason he wasn't dead was because he brought information about Akatsuki, a jinchuriki, and even then he'd had to prove himself in combat against the fastest ninja currently alive. The Land of Iron really was cut off from all politics outside their borders if they thought the Hidden Cloud and the Hidden Leaf had worked together on something. I agree, but this means that we won't have to worry about getting the Hidden Leaf and the Hidden Sand to agree, said the Raikage. Unless they're planning to betray us. Sasuke shook his head. No, the Hokage wouldn't do that. Tsunade of the Sanin might be good at it, but she wouldn't start a war unless you took an army to the gates of her village. The Raikage nodded thoughtfully. Then at the end of the month, we can avenge my brother, and stop Akatsuki. You'll need to stay out of sight, but I'll want you nearby in case Akatsuki attacks. Sasuke nodded his compliance. Taking orders from the Raikage would have been unthinkable to him a few years ago, but the man had proven his strength, and Sasuke was willing to put aside his pride if it meant stopping Akatsuki. The Tsuchikage stared at the two sets of paper in front of him in confusion. It was rare to get anything from the Hidden Leaf Village with the exception of war threats if he didn't recall troops from the borders or rein in his men or some other warmongering effort he had going at any given time. On any other matter, he would have thrown the invitation to a 5-cage summit out of his window without a second thought, but two factors made him seriously consider it. Firstly, the Raikage, leader of the village hidden in the clouds and one of the Hidden Rock's staunchest allies, had asked for the exact same thing. And secondly, the topic of debater was the group of S-ranked criminals known as Akatsuki. For some time now, the oldest living Kage had hired Akatsuki to keep his village's outward appearance of power, while at the same time keeping a hold of every last bit of cash possible. A while back though, Akatsuki had stopped accepting new jobs, claiming backlog. The Tsuchikage hadn't looked at it too deeply. The criminal organization had ridiculously low prices, and it was no surprise that they had more jobs than they could handle. Confident that he would only be without the strength of Akatsuki augmenting his village's ninja for a few weeks at most, the elder Kage had let it slide. Weeks turned to months, and his people had failed to get in contact with the two jinchuriki given to the Hidden Rock by the first Hokage back when the concept of hidden villages was fresh out of the Senju's head. He had suspicions about the criminal group then, but brushed them aside, though a little more hesitantly this time. Han and Roshi were the last two powerhouses of the village outside of his own flesh and blood. Losing them put the village in a tough spot, and he was glad when his spies reported that the other villages were also missing their jinchuriki. Then he had found out from a sort of public service announcement from the Hidden Leaf that it had been Akatsuki that had been capturing his jinchuriki. The Tsuchikage had been furious, but Akatsuki had erased their presence well. Beyond telling his ninja to capture anyone dressed in black cloaks adorned with red clouds, there wasn't much he could do. The information on Akatsuki's members had been useful, but there was one name that jumped out at him and blew up his office. He knew Deidara hadn't been up to any good since she had left the village to show the world her art, but the aging Kage had never imagined that she had joined an organization he had been using for years. It threatened to break his stony heart that Deidara was a member of an organization that had apparently harmed the Hidden Rock directly. He knew there was no love lost between his wayward apprentice and the village of her birth, but he never thought it would go anywhere beyond teenaged rebellion, violent exit notwithstanding. Still, he had fought Madara Uchiha and lived, he had led the village hidden in the rocks through 2 wars, and he had been a prominent figure in the other one. If his successor's actions elicited anything from Onoki the fence-sitter, his mentors would be rolling over in their graves. Still, he wished that Deidara had stuck around to take the hat when he got too old for the job. Which was about 10 years ago. Heya Gramps, what are looking at? As it was, he would have to bear the burden of office until his granddaughter grew up and began to take her career as a ninja seriously. He might have to find a way to be Tsuchikage from beyond the grave. Wow, you're actually going to go to this thing. I though you hated the Hidden Leaf. Give that back, you damned brat. Onoki lunged over the desk, pausing midair as an unimaginable pain shot down his back, coalesced at the base of his spine, and then exploded outwards. Ah, my back. His insolent granddaughter waved the papers in front of his face, pulling them away when he reached out for them with a trembling hand. Geez Gramps, you are really getting too old for this gig. Maybe you ought to just give me the hat, huh? Said Kuritsuchi as she smiled at her grandfather sarcastically. Over my dead body. Groaned out the oldest living leader of any ninja village, great or small. Kuretsuchi sighed as she walked around her grandfather's desk and picked him up bodily with both arms wrapped around him. She contracted her arms, and the Tsuchikage's back snapped loudly as the short old man gave a sigh of relief. Sitting back down, he elaborated on why he was even considering attending the 5-Kage summit. The Raikage handed out a similar invitation, and the reason for the meeting is Akatsuki. Kuretsuchi inhaled sharply as her grandfather mentioned the organization that, as far as she was concerned, had taken away her older sister. Deidara wasn't a blood relative, but she had been the closest thing Kuretsuchi had ever had before the genius ninja had destroyed half of the village on her dramatic exit. So are we going? Asked Kuretsuchi apprehensively. It will be at the end of the month, said Onoki matter-of-factly. I'll give you the honor of guarding me, Onoki the fence-sitter, third Tsuchikage, oldest living leader of any village, great or small. The old Kage would have no doubt gone on, listing all the titles he had ever accumulated in his long life, if his upstart granddaughter hadn't tapped him on the small of the back, setting off another wave of pain. My back. Ah. Naruto could feel the tension flow out of him as he eased his way into the hot water. So far today, he had earned Deidara's ire, but not her scorn and eternal hatred, which was more than he'd been expecting. He'd realized that just leaving Akatsuki wasn't an option, but if it became necessary to fight his way out, his partner would be right alongside him. Still, now he had someone to stay alive for, and for Deidara's sake, he would continue with his plan to just fly right under Akatsuki's nose. Still, he was hoping that his hand wasn't forced into any more jinchuriki capturing escapades. Yo, Naruto. Thanks again for letting me go. Now I get to have a vacation. Kick back, and get some deserved relaxation. Finding you here though, what are the odds? This must a sign from the gods. Yeah. Naruto's eyes widened in horror at the rapping man soaking in the hot spring across from him. How he had missed Killer Bee's massive form was a mystery, but the eight-tails jinchuriki was sitting in the water, rapping to his heart's content. What are you doing here? Asked Naruto, incredulously. Killer Bee, to his credit, didn't seem to see a problem with running into a ninja that had literally chopped him into tiny bits when they had last met. I'm never allowed to just lay back chill. Always some enemy I've gotta kill. But now that I'm dead I'm finally free. And when I return, it'll be a jubilee. Yeah, rapped Killer Bee, raising his hand skyward in celebration of his brilliant idea to just not return home when Naruto had given him a chance to escape. I'm going to just come out and tell you that this is a stroke of bad luck driven by a terrible decision on your part, said Naruto, placing his head in his palms. I have appearances to keep up, and this time, I can't just let you go. Sure you can, I was never here. How about later, we go out for a beer? Rapped Killer Bee. Man, that plan, it's just ideal. It's foolproof, made of steel. Yeah. Killer Bee's voice rose in volume until he was practically shouting the last bit, and Naruto sighed as another blonde head poked over the divider in annoyance. Damn it, people are trying to relax here. Will you stop your yelling? Hold on a second. Deidara slowed down as she laid eyes on Killer Bee, and disappeared back behind the bamboo wall. Naruto sighed heavily and got out of the water himself. Hey ho, where do ya go? You just got here. Relax, ya know. Rapped Killer Bee as Naruto went back into the shower rooms to retrieve his clothing and then beat Killer Bee senseless for, among other reasons, his own idiocy. Unsealing his Akatsuki gear from a scroll in the pocket of his civilian clothes, Naruto met up with an equally wet and annoyed Deidara. He knows we have to capture him now, right? Asked Deidara, disbelieving Killer Bee's decision to not return to the village hidden in the clouds when he had the chance. I think so, sighed Naruto in exasperation. But I'm not sure of anything with him anymore. Apparently, Killer Bee hadn't been expecting the Akatsuki members to return, jutsu blazing. He hopped out of the hot spring in surprise, covered in only a towel. Whoa, this side is for men. For a woman to be here violates our den. He yelled, to some unheard beat. Deidara threw a small explosive at the jinchuriki, who dodged it expertly. The bomb detonated in the water, kicking up a spray of steaming liquid while the few non-involved patrons vacated the scene as quickly and quietly as possible. You've violated manhood's sacred wards. Will you at least wait for me to get my swords? Deidara looked at him like he had gone insane before turning to Naruto and ascending on a newly created clay hawk. Naruto placed one hand on his face in exasperation, sensing Killer Bee's location even with his eyes closed. The jinchuriki of the Nine Tails jumped at the barely clothed Cloud Ninja, who was holding his own surprisingly well. Hey now, let's all calm down. Honestly, you're just playing the clown. Naruto was certain that Killer Bee was going to rap more, but he was cut off when Naruto delivered a powerful punch to the jinchuriki's stomach to shut him up. The blow made Killer Bee's eyes bulge comically as he was launched into a building. To his credit, Killer Bee took the blow that would have taken out some members of Akatsuki and got back up. Now you've just made me irate. Get ready to meet Mr. 8. Killer Bee's hand shot skyward, but Deidara was having none of it. Several clay birds flew into the jinchuriki and exploded in a cloud of smoke and fire. When the smoke cleared, Killer Bee stood unscathed, covered in blood-red chakra. The demonic chakra also covered him up, which was something everyone present was grateful for. The eight-tails jinchuriki held up his arms, and the chakra began to form the snow-white bones of an ox's skull and spine. You're no match for this attack. Now fear my eighth sword, my lariat. With that, Killer Bee launched forward at a speed Naruto could barely follow. He swung the skull forward, and it violently shattered. Killer Bee had time to look surprised before he was flung back by a ball of black chakra whirling between Naruto's hands. Naruto's tailed beast ball faded into the air, since the Akatsuki member wished to keep the village hidden in the hot springs on the map. The golden light faded as quickly as it had emerged, and Naruto frantically checked to make sure that Zetsu was nowhere near. Sighing in relief at the plant man's lack of presence, Naruto looked to where Killer Bee was lying in a pool of tailed beast chakra. Naruto had held his attack back, but if his fight with Jiraiya's Sage Mode had taught him anything, it was that chakra of one nature was useless defensively against itself, whether the chakra in question was lightning, wind, sage, or even tailed beast. Despite that, Killer Bee's tailed beast would have likely healed all of the injuries in a few more seconds, and he would have rapped some more before continuing. But Naruto had something that Killer Bee didn't have at the moment. And Naruto's partner bombarded the area around Killer Bee into an unrecognizable crater. When the smoke finally cleared, Killer Bee was lying on the ground, unconscious. Naruto searched the area for any copies of Killer Bee's chakra, determined not to show another failed attempt at Killer Bee's capture to Akatsuki. Satisfied that the unconscious, and completely naked, jinchuriki in front of him was in fact Killer Bee, Naruto removed his Akatsuki cloak to cover the man. Man, it's good to have you back, yeah. If we keep this up, no one will suspect you, okay? Deidara's hawk flew down to land next to Naruto, and tossed him a pelican, which quickly scooped up the unconscious jinchuriki into its beak. Naruto hopped onto the second bird and smiled at his partner. You're right. We'll survive this. The two blondes smiled at each other as their clay mounts took off into the sky. As they flew overhead, Deidara donated a few pieces of art to the museum. Lady Mizukage. An urgent message from the land of iron. The blue-haired boy who burst into the Mizukage's office earned a glare from his superior officer for his loud entrance. Honestly boy, if you keep running around like that, you'll never get to be a real man. Now spit it out calmly. Ow, the Mizukage's trusted advisor berated the first member of the next generation of the Hidden Mist's 7 ninja swordsmen for his overeager attitude. It just wouldn't do to have the leader of the Hidden Mist's elite acting like a little child. Honestly, if you don't stop running around you'll never get a real man. Ow. Shut up, or I'll kill you. Ao looked at his cage with confusion, but knew she was perfectly capable of following through on her threat. So he shut up. Now Chojuro, what is this message? Chojuro inhaled deeply and straightened his glasses to appear more mature before continuing. A messenger from the land of iron came bearing these. I checked for traps, just like I was supposed to, and it appears to be an invitation to a 5-cage summit. Mei Terumi placed a hand on her chin as she thought about the repercussions of accepting or declining the offer. Not going would either tell the other villages that the Hidden Mist could care less what the other hidden villages did, but it was more likely people would assume that the Hidden Mist just couldn't spare the manpower to actually attend. On the other hand, if she attended, the Hidden Mist would show that they had just as much strength as any other hidden village, and were still deserving of the title Kage. And the chance to meet the other Kage and perhaps join an alliance would benefit her village greatly, assuming that the village actually did have the strength it needed to fight the other two. Very well. We'll need to make a strong impression. Chojuro. Chojuro snapped to attention, saluting his Mizukage in an overly stiff manner. How many bodyguards am I allowed to bring? 2, ma'am, replied Chojuro as quickly as he could. Mei quickly ran through her options. She knew who her 2 strongest ninja were, but she also didn't want to leave the village completely leaderless again in case something happened. But she would have to be careful that she didn't give the reins to someone who would be easily corrupted or overthrown. She had tried to bring the village out of the era of the bloody mist, but some remnants held on. I've decided, said the 5th Mizukage, standing up a tad melodramatically. You and Ao shall be my guards. Chojuro seemed incredibly flattered, but Ao was taken aback. Lady Mizukage, may I ask who will guard the village? I don't think it will be strong enough without at least one of us, he said incredulously. I'm fully aware of that, Ao. I never said you would both be guarding my body. Chojuro conceded that well enough. You'll be taking the hat while I'm gone. Ao sputtered and was rendered speechless by the Mizukage's declaration. The Hidden Mist is so strong, their leader only needs half the bodyguards the other cages do. Ao finally managed to find his voice and give his concerned words. Lady Mizukage, I must object. Chojuro is not, I mean, he isn't yet old enough to be a strong enough man to be entrusted with your protection. If you will not accept my proposal and let both of us accompany you, at least allow me to be your bodyguard. Lady Mizukage, old, not accept, proposal. Ow. Shut up or I'll kill you. Why is he naked? Hidan was of course the only one tactless enough to mention the 8 Tails' lack of clothing. Naruto sighed heavily. We found him at some hot springs. Of course he wasn't wearing anything. Well then why didn't you let the poor man get dressed? Kakuzu was the one to glare at his partner this time, not even needing to speak up to force his partner into silence. Just saying. I agree with Hidan. That was just rude, said Zetsu. Of course, he immediately refuted his own point. Fool. If they had let him get dressed, he would have just ran and escaped. I suppose you have a point. But I'm not hunting any naked jinchuriki. Pain stepped in before the argument could escalate any further. Regardless of the target's clothes or lack thereof, the point remains that he was captured, leaving only one jinchuriki left. We will take the 7 tails during the 5-cage summit, showing the world Akatsuki's strength. Perhaps I'm simply out of the loop, but is there a reason we don't simply take it before the summit? Asked Orochimaru. Pain's rippled eyes turned to the snake Sanin, who didn't look embarrassed at all. If we take the jinchuriki beforehand, then there is no guarantee that the cage will still meet. The plan requires all of them to be crushed at the same time, in the same place. Pain's legendary eyes narrowed. Anyone who disagrees with the plan is more than welcome to dispute it with me in person. Orochimaru's smile was so sickeningly sweet that if no one would have been able to mistake it for real if they could see it on the shadowy silhouette. No, I'll see where this plan goes. Just curious. Pain turned back to face all of the members of Akatsuki. We will muster our strength in the land of iron in 1 month's time, and the world will know pain. The members of Akatsuki followed their leader's lead one by one and flickered out of existence. The last to disappear was Hidan. Oh, I get it now. Because Pain is his name, and he'll show them pain. Clever. Lord Kage, a messenger has arrived from the land of iron with an invitation to a 5-Kage summit. The youngest Kage looked up from his paperwork to see his sister standing ramrod straight as she awaited his response. Ever since his capture and Konkuro's death, she had thrown herself into her training wholeheartedly, vowing not to stop until either she or Akatsuki were dead. Who called for the summit? Asked Gaara warily. He might be young, but he wasn't stupid. If the invitation was from the hidden rock, it was possibly a ploy to get him alone for an assassination attempt. It wouldn't work of course, but such an attempt would force his village into a war he didn't want. There are two. One from the village hidden in the leaves, and one from the village hidden in the clouds. That ruled out assassination attempts. They would have made the appeal from just the hidden leaf, since he had no reason to trust anyone but his village's only allies. The hidden cloud would bring up all kinds of red flags, which was shy it raised none. Very well. I trust you'll accompany me when the time comes. Tamari nodded curtly. Gaara looked over the scrolls from the Land of Iron's messenger. Any suggestions for my second bodyguard? I was thinking of Baki, but he'll be needed here to keep the village running smoothly during my absence. Perhaps you could bring Lord Ebizo. I doubt anyone else will bring such a revered ninja and genjutsu pioneer as a bodyguard. Gaara brought up his hand in thought. It was true that Ebizo's mind hadn't dulled a bit in his old age, and his genjutsu was as potent as ever. If anything, he had grown more dangerous. And any ninja older than 40 would know him with some degree of respect. He was also too old to act as Kage should something happen. That's a good idea, said Gaara calmly. I'll send for him and explain the situation. You're dismissed. Tamari saluted once more before leaving her brother's office to get in a few more hours of training before the sun set. And probably a few afterwards. Gaara sighed heavily. He would be the only person there who knew what Akatsuki could do and what they would do. He didn't put it past them to attack a meeting of the most powerful ninja that were still part of a village. Still, this time he wouldn't be fighting for everyone in his village, and could use the new trick he had developed just for Akatsuki. All in all, he had a good feeling about his chances should Akatsuki decide to assault the meeting. Gaara set down his paperwork and decided to pay Ebizo a visit instead of summoning the elder to his office like any other ninja under his command. It was a long trek up to the mountain where the honorable siblings lived, but the sand was everywhere, and despite losing Shukaku, the sand remained his ally. He knocked on the large doors to the living area of one of the last living founders of the hidden sand village. When the doors did not open, Gaara opened them anyway, asserting his authority as Kage. Sitting on one side of the large pond where the village got all of their water was Ebizo, fishing quietly, as befitted a man of his age and dignity. Across from him was an unmanned fishing rod that had once belonged to Lady Chio, Ebizo's elder sister, and pioneer of the field of puppetry. Gaara remembered all too painfully the sacrifice she had made to give him a second chance at leading the village. Gaara slowly approached the old man, who did not react to his presence at all. As he got closer, Gaara became slightly panicked as he noticed that Ebizo did not appear to be breathing at all. Gaara broke into a run to get to the old man and take his pulse, but the moment he touched the old genjutsu user, Ebizo moved. Haha. I was just pretending to be dead. He continued laughing loudly, until the noise slowed down and began to sound quite sad. She used to do that all the time, and I fell for it every time. But she's not just faking it now, huh? Gaara smiled sadly, and decided to simply tell Ebizo why he had come. He had never been very good at comforting anyway. I'm sorry to disturb you Lord Ebizo, but I have a large favor to ask. I was wondering if you would like to accompany me as my bodyguard to the 5-Kage summit. I fully understand if you don't wish to, but I thought to offer you the honor and recognition of your legendary service to the village. Ebizo chuckled sadly. I would be honored, if you would have an old geezer like myself. I assume Akatsuki will be in attendance. I would be surprised if they do not make an appearance, said Gaara. Ebizo smiled as the fishing rod across from him began to move as the fish it had hooked began to pull on the bait. Would you believe that she gets a bite every day now? said Ebizo in false exasperation. She couldn't get a bite to save her life back when she was there. Now I'm lucky if a fish leaves her side of the pool. Gaara looked at the fishing rod, which refused to fall over despite the fish's efforts. Ebizo had done quite a good job at propping it up. Gaara looked at the resolute rod one last time before leaving Ebizo to his own devices until the 5-Kage summit at the end of the month. No matter what happened, Gaara somehow knew that it would be big. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.